Yo, what's going on guys? Winter Kills here and welcome to a brand new guide video in which we will be talking about Speedroid and Speedroid accessories. I realize it's been over 3 years since I've made a guide for Speedroids, and I figured now would be a good a time as any to go ahead and throw out a long overdue update for it. As many of you know, this is the deck that I've been playing recently, and if you go back and look through some of my recent videos in my Saturday night local series, you can see I've been playing this deck extensively, and before that I've been playing Speedroid for a long time on and off. So definitely feel qualified to talk about the subject, and hopefully you guys will be able to learn something if you are new to the deck and want to play it and haven't played it yet, or if you consider yourself somewhat of a veteran. Ideally, there's something here for everybody to take and learn from, and if there's something, of course, that I did miss in this video, as always, feel free to drop it down in the comment section below. Now, first things first, we are going to be talking about two sort of different variants of Speedroid in this specific guide video. One being the pure variant of Speedroid, which I will be touching briefly on, as I don't have that much experience playing pure in this current format as I do playing the Kashtira variant. But of course, I wanted to still cover the pure variant to some degree, because I know not everybody will be able to play the Kashtira variant because of how much it can cost. And of course, if you are watching this video a year or two from now, right, the Kashtira cards might not be viable due to future ban lists and meta, etc., etc. So I will be keeping that in mind as we go throughout this video, talking about both variants. But first, let's kind of get to talk about the actual archetype itself. For those that are completely unfamiliar, what is Speedroid? Well, it is a wind machine based deck. That is mainly what all of the Speedroid monsters are. They are wind machines. There is a lot of restrictions that this archetype tends to place on you as the player, such as locking you to only special summoning wind monsters or activating wind monster effects. And it does have a tendency to lock you into synchros in the extra deck via its primary ace link monster, High Speedroid Rubber Band Shooter. So if that really isn't something that suits your style, then I would suggest clicking off right now, because we are going to be fully embracing the wind archetype, the synchro summoning mechanic here within this video. And yeah, synchro based at its core. As I just mentioned, tons of synchro. That's why I love this deck so much. Synchro is one of my favorite summoning mechanics in the game. Not really sure why, but I really enjoy it. But of course, there is room for link monsters. Of course, as I said, one of their best extra deck monsters is a link monster, and there is some overlap for some Xyzs, mainly considering the the rank 3 pool and the rank 7 pool. Specifically regarding the Kashtira build. And really quickly before we move forward, I just want to kind of lay out to you guys what I'll be talking about in this video so you have a better idea. And if you also weren't aware and seen just the length of the video, it is going to be a long video. It's really the only way I can get all of this information out in a clear, concise manner is making it a long video. So I'm going to be talking about a deck profile where we'll be just looking at the bare bones of the deck, no non-engine, no side deck cards, just everything that I feel is mandatory for both a Speedroid Kashtira build and a Speedroid Pure build. We'll be going over some combos for you guys as well, various combos of 1 to 2 to 3 card combos, right? We're talking about hand traps and how they specifically interact with those combos, perhaps how to play around them where we can. Then we'll be going into a tech card section where I'll be going over a series of cards that I necessarily wasn't playing in my current deck list, but could be played at some point in the future. Other engines, things of that nature, right? Because I don't want to leave too much on the table, because again, I want to make this video kind of as foolproof to time as I possibly can by putting some other potential options that may become viable at points down the road. And after that, I will also be doing sort of a closing thought section where I'll just kind of be putting it all together, talk about the cost of the deck, putting out some key tips, some final things to remember, if you will, about the deck before you decide to pick it up in paper and play it for yourself. I'll be recommending you guys a suite of other videos that you can check out on my channel, and maybe other channels as well, that you guys can watch to get even more information about the deck in terms of how it is played in actual tournament matches, other things like that. And yeah, talking about expectations as well when it comes to playing this deck. And also, last thing here for this sort of intro segment, I do want to talk about and preface that this deck is definitely not an easy deck to play. If you are a beginner in Yu-Gi-Oh, I really wouldn't recommend this deck right off the rip. There's probably other decks you can play, of which some I cannot name right now because they're just take a little while, but it is a difficult deck to play. There is a lot of decision trees to be made, and there is some RNG factors in the deck. Most of the time they don't matter, but sometimes they can matter. A lot of playing 2 to 3, 4 steps ahead, right? Thinking far ahead, decision branches. The deck will punish you greatly for misplaying. And yeah, so I wanted to put that out there. Let you guys know in advance, this is not an easy deck to play by any means. Is it one of the hardest decks I've ever played? No, it's definitely not up there at the top of the difficulty ladder, but I would say it's maybe around 50, 65, approaching 70% difficulty, right? You will kind of stress your noggin out while playing this deck, and that goes for both the Kashtira variant and the pure variant. So wanted to throw that on the table, and that is pretty much going to wrap it up here for this intro segment for this Speedroid deck guide here in 2024. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the deck profile. Alright, so here we are at the start of the deck profile portion of this video. Like I said earlier, this is going to be a bare bones rundown of the Speedroid Kashtira deck. And don't worry, I will be showing my most modern take on a pure variant shortly after we take a look through this. Now, again, bare bones, what does that mean? We are not taking a look at the non-engine that I'm currently electing to play as I'm recording this video, just because that is not important right now when we're talking about the deck. Obviously, all that stuff is subject to change as time goes on. So let's take a look what I feel as though is mandatory and necessary to play Speedroid Kashtira as far as engine is concerned. And it would be no surprise to see at the forefront of that we have 2 copies of Speedroid Terratop. This card has somewhat recently gone to 2 after being locked at 1 for quite a long time. It is really great to see it come back to 2, though, of course. This is single-handedly one of the best starters, if not the best starters, in the entire deck. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you normal or special summon Speedroid Terratop, you can add a Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand that is not Speedroid Terratop. Now, a lot of you guys might remember Terratop as a card that was used back in the day in the Zodiac decks. You know, a 1-card combo to get you into your full Zoo combo, right? Because you'd make the MX Saber Invoker through the Terratop searching Tekatomborg. Tekatomborg would summon itself because you control the Terratop, and then you could go into that really broken rank 3. And Tekatomborg was often viewed as the brick back then. Well, the opposite really is true in this deck. Not so much the opposite, but Tekatomborg is one of our best extenders, and we often search it off of this card, and we actually use its other effect, which we'll talk about. But yeah, great extender in the deck. There are a lot of cards in this particular event that play off the fact that we want to have no monsters on our field, like the cash card specifically. There's a whole suite of cards we can play to help facilitate that kind of playstyle, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, definitely want to max out onto Terratop. If this card goes to 3, if you're watching when it is at 3, I would definitely play 3. What I would cut for it, the third one, that is a different story, although I maybe have an idea of that. But yeah, this is something you want to play at 2. Max it out whether you're playing pure or the cash variant. So that is Terratop. We will move on to the next card in the deck for the engine, which is 2 copies of Tekatomborg. This is a card I think that is honestly kind of perfect right where it is at 2. This is a card I think that playing a 1 of would be far too little, and I think playing at 3 would be a little too much, because this is a card that you can only special summon 1 time per turn. Doesn't matter how you special summon it, right? Doesn't matter if you use Monster Reborn to bring it back out of the grave, or Speed Recovery, or you just special summon it via its own effect. That is it. You get 1 special summon of it. So we do not want to draw necessarily multiples of these cards, or at least any more than 2. Because we still can normal summon 1 and then special summon the other one, because in order to special summon the Speedroid Tekatomborg with its in-hand effect, all we need to do is control another wind monster. It does not activate, it just hits the board just like that. Its other effect though, however, one of the better effects that it has, is that you contribute it off the field as cost, which means you can do it under things like Skill Drain, to be able to summon a Speedroid tuner from the deck. So that gets out Den Den Daiko Duke, it gets out Fukimadoshi Piper, Car Turbo, or Red Eye Dai if you are playing that card. So this card is the bridge to all of your tuners, which is very, very important considering you know, we are a synchro-based deck, and we need access to our tuners if we want to synchro. So, also important to remember, I did talk about restrictions. This is one of those cards that does restrict us. If we use that effect to summon a Speedroid tuner, we can only special summon winds for the rest of the turn. And speaking of restrictions, this is the other card in the main deck that does restrict us. But although it's not the only Speedroid card outside of Tekatomborg that restricts us, there are a couple others that we'll talk about. But Car Turbo is a level 3 tuner that says if we control a wind monster, semicolon or a colon I believe, we can special summon it to the field, and that means it is an activated effect. So it's an effect that you have to declare in hand. It's different than Tekatomborg, where it is a inherent summon where you can just summon it so long as you meet that requirement. This one you will have to activate, which means your opponent could potentially respond to the activation of Car Turbo, so don't forget that. It does nothing on field like Tekatomborg. It just sits there as a level 3 tuner, which is good because, you know, it's the only tuner in the deck that actually special summons itself, which is really, really strong. The other ones either just have to be normal summoned outright or brought out by a different mean. So Car Turbo is great at fact, but it has a graveyard effect that says we can banish it and another Speedroid as cost to make all wind monsters we control gain 800 attack until the end of the turn. And that might not seem like the greatest effect, but it does actually get you to game a lot faster than you would be able to otherwise, which is great because sometimes this deck in this variant can have a harder time going for a game. The pure variant tends to have a little bit easier time, but this definitely makes it much easier. So yeah, definitely want to play 2 Car Turbo. But the other thing, like I said, restriction. This one is not as harsh as Tekatomborg. This one says that when we use the effect to summon it from the hand, we are only able to activate the effects of wind monsters for the rest of the turn. So definitely keep that in mind. How you want to use these effects, how you sequence them, definitely does matter. That kind of plays into the difficulty of playing this deck. Next up, we have a few 1-ups here, really just 3 1-ups to round out the rest of the Speedroid monsters within the main deck. The first one being Speedroid Double Yo-Yo. This one says if it is normal summon, you can target a level 3 or lower Speedroid monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Now keep in mind that is only on normal summon. This card will not get that effect if it is special summoned off of something like Speed Recovery, for example. So only a normal summon here and has a very sort of specific setup. You need a level 3 or lower engrave to be able to bring back, ideally, a tuner to make a synchro play, or you can make a Link 2 play into something like SP Little Knight, or you could go into Rubber Band Shooter, whatever it may be. So, 1 Double Yo-Yo, and the reason we really play Double Yo-Yo is not because it's, like, one of the best cards in the deck, something like Tekatomborg, or Terratop, or Marble Machine, or Ultra Houndrite. We really play this card specifically because it fits in with our combo with Rubber Band Shooter. A lot of times we will be banishing a 7, which we'll talk more about when we get to the extra deck. But banishing a 7 off of the Link 2's effect to be able to reveal 2 Speedroids in the deck and take one of those at random while the other gets sent to the graveyard. And having Double Yo-Yo in the deck makes it so we can eliminate the factor of RNG, right? Randomness, if you will, when resolving a card like that. Because with Double Yo-Yo, if we get Double Yo-Yo and Terratop goes to the graveyard, we can normal summon Terratop or use our normal summon Double Yo-Yo rather with our additional normal or not to bring back the Terratop that we didn't get and resolve its effect. And again, same can be said if we don't get Double Yo-Yo, we still get Terratop to our hand, which allows us to resolve Terratop, which gets us various things depending on which build we are playing, right? So that is mainly the reason why we play Double Yo-Yo in the deck. Now, I know some people will play 2 to 3 copies of this, which I think is so grossly incorrect in any variant of the deck. I think 1 is perfectly fine. It's not really a great card to draw. It's definitely an even worse card to draw going second in most cases, and it serves a very specific role, which does require setup. And in my mind, in my personal opinion, that is a card that should not be played at more than 1 copy. And I definitely have not missed the second copy, that is for sure. Moving on, we have a one-of in the form of Speedroid Dendendaiko Duke. This is a card that I have played at 2 pretty religiously in all variants of Speedroids that I've played for the past couple years. But I think now, with trying to streamline the deck and make it as consistent as possible, I think this card now finds a really good home at 1, because I haven't really missed the second copy, right? I've just kind of always had it embedded in my head that this should be a 2-of until I actually decided to make the leap of playing it at 1. And I think it works really, really well at 1. I think in the format that we are in, with the decks that be at the very top, we can't afford to play multiple cards like this in the deck to give us a worse chance at winning the game going second, right? And games are over a lot faster, right? That's just going to kind of continue to trend upwards as time goes on. And the second copy and the grind game that it would theoretically give us by being in the deck is not necessarily worth even having, because the games might not even ever grind out to that point to begin with. So I think 1 Duke is fine. Its effect is as follows, right? If it's in the graveyard, we can banish and summon a Speedroid Tuner from our hand or grave. That is not Dendendaiko Duke. So it is an additional extender by every definition of the word, and it does help raise the power level of our plays by slightly bringing down the consistency of our deck. It's kind of that trade-off and balance of power and consistency. Definitely still a much needed one-of. And then last but not least, for Speedroid monsters in the main deck, we have 1 copy of Speedroid Fukimadoshi Piper, a one-of, I think, in every single Speedroid build on the planet right now. This card is absolutely insane. Some of the best support this deck has seen in a long time. If it is normal or special summon, you can excavate the cards off the top of your deck, equal number of other wind monsters you control, right? So that doesn't include itself. Take 1 of those cards, put the rest back to the bottom. So it's like an in-engine Pot of Duality, Pot of Prosperity. And since we are playing Pot of Prosperity in this particular build, right, we can dig several cards deep with any given turn to help find key extenders, non-engine cards, or side deck cards in games 2 and 3, making this card so incredibly valuable. It also makes our Synchro 6 plays that much more valuable because it is a level 4, allowing us to climb into a level 10 Synchro play in the form of something like Baron de Fleur, which again is one of the best boss monsters for this deck to play. It does have a secret graveyard effect, which can come up in niche situations, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it is a effect that says we can target a level 3 or higher wind monster we control, banish this card from the graveyard to make that monster lose 2 levels. So it does have a little bit of level manipulation there to it, which is kind of cool, and does again come up in some niche situations. But that is pretty much it for all the Speedroid monsters in this particular variant. Not that many, but it all does work as a very tight-knit, sort of cohesive engine, and I like it very much like that. So now we're going to take a look at some of the other engine cards that aren't necessarily Speedroid monsters. And to start off that section of monsters, we have 2 copies of Mecha Phantom Beast, Tetherwolf, and the reason we're playing this is really simply put for just 2 reasons. First and foremost being it is a 1-card rubber band shooter, because when it is summoned, it has a mandatory effect which summons a Mecha Phantom Beast token, level 3/0/0. So you can link off with the Tetherwolf and the token and go right into Rubber Band Shooter, which only requires 2 wind monsters to get into. And the other reason we play it is because while there is a Mecha Phantom Beast token on the field, not only can this card not be destroyed by battle or a card effect, but it gains the levels of all Mecha Phantom Beast tokens on the field, and most of the time you're going to have 1. So this will go from a 4 to a 7, and we are obviously playing Kashtira cards, right? So that allows us to make rank 7 plays, and what better wind rank 7 to make than Dracosack to act as a pseudo form of Auroradon? May he rest in peace. And obviously Dracosack allows us to do a whole lot more comboing than we would otherwise. So not only does this help us to facilitate our sort of rubber band shooter and our Speedroid engine, but this can help to further facilitate our Speedroid engine through the help of the Kashtira cards with its level manipulation effect. And it also has one more secret effect, if you will, is that when it battles, it contributes a Mecha Phantom Beast token to make it gain 800 attack until the end of the turn, putting up to 2,500, which is kind of big, and if you add the card turbo boost on top of that, right, it can get up to 3,300 all by itself, which can out some things on its own, which is kind of cool. So yeah, 2 Tetherwolf, and that's kind of like an honorary Speedroid card, but it's obviously not a Speedroid card, but it's definitely a great normal summon to play in the deck, because it does a lot, as I just mentioned. Now moving on, we have 3 copies of Kashtira Fenrir. One of the most broken cards in the deck, and honestly one of the most broken cards in the game currently. It's no doubt that we play this card right, just because not only is it level 7 and helps us get into Dragosack, right, with Mech Vanabeast Tetherwolf, and even with just Unicorn, but on its own, this card is just fantastic as a part of the end board, or just a card to draw for going second, right? It can search other copies of itself. It can search a copy of Unicorn for follow-up, or Scareclaw Kashtira as sort of a nice little extender mid-combo, if you will. And yeah, definitely want to max out on this card if you can. If you don't, just play as many as you can, or you can play Ascendant of Thunder. Would be a decent budget option. And then really the main reason why we even bothered to play the Kashtira cards in the deck is because of this guy right here, Kashtira Unicorn. If it wasn't obvious, right, it's a win monster. That's why we play him. It's one of the best Speedroid starters to ever exist. This is what I was mentioning about primarily when I was talking about Speedroid accessories, right? Just good old Unicorn. Can slap itself on the field if you have no monsters, much like Unicorn or Fenrir rather. The fact that it's a level 7 pairs so well with the various level 3 tuners that we have within the deck to make Baron a Fleur. And of course, it searches a monster reborn for itself in the form of Birth, which is also an interruption in its own right. And this, like Unicorn, or like Fenrir rather, is also a disruption, getting to look at our opponent's extra deck, getting to banish a card face down, right? Applies a lot of pressure, allows the deck to do a whole lot more than we'd be able to without it. So definitely want to max out on that on 3. And then we have 1 copy of Scareclaw Cash, just because, again, sometimes you will have the opportunity in sort of this deck's main combo to resolve Fenrir, to grab you another extender, and Scareclaw Cash can be used to make something like Baron, because again it still is a level 7, and allows our Birth to bring back Unicorn or Fenrir to act as an additional form of interruption, or be able to play through really powerful hand traps like Nibiru and still end on some form of interruption. And if we want to be as consistent as we possibly can be, we do want to play as many copies of all of the aforementioned cash cards as we possibly can, and the only way to do that is by playing 3 copies of Pressure Planet Raidsoft and a copy of Terraforming to boot. Now, if Terratop did go to 3, I'd probably cut the Terraforming, put it to 0, and just play the deck as is, but I think this is perfectly fine. Now, I understand this card is very, very expensive. Yeah, for some unknown reason. I mean, I obviously know why. I don't think it's been reprinted yet. It's still a great card, but if you can't get your hands on this, I would just try to play as many cash cards as you have, and try to substitute this with any form of generic consistency cards, or Ascendant of Thunder, right? Play, Upstart Goblin, which is out at 3. You could try to max out on Pot of Prosperity. You could even be a madman and try to play Pot of Desires, but you'd have to rebuild the deck, honestly, so maybe that's not the best option. But play those if you can. Then next up, we have 2 copies of Pot of Prosperity. This is a card kind of like Tekatomorg. It's not something I really want to draw more than 2 copies of ever. I really only ever want to see 1 of this card. Now, should we play 1 because of that? No, this card is obviously insane. Definitely would like to play a little bit more than just 1, so I want to see it sometimes, but not all the time, right? Just a great generic consistency card. And a lot of times we can only ever banish 3 off of this, not because the extra deck is so tightly knit, but because Piper usually gets us the other 3 cards that we would have excavated off this, sparing ourselves 3 extra cards in the extra deck to be able to use later on. And then I should have also included this with the cash card, but 2 copies of Birth. I was always playing 1, but the second copy of Birth just makes that follow-up Unicorn so much better, and just gives you so much more grind game. And not to mention, sometimes opening this card with Fenrir just allows you to combo the same way you would have if you open up like Unicorn and Planet, right? It kind of gives you just more access to more cards in the deck that combo very well together to make really strong 2-card combos. It does suck, of course, if you draw this without any cash cards. Now that we're playing 2, it's technically a higher chance to do that, but the potential and the power that you have in that second Unicorn being able to resolve its effect again and search for another Birth is just second to none. And I would definitely recommend playing it. Now we're going to take a look at the extra deck. Now, as we take a look at the extra deck, remember still this is like a bare bones look at it. I will show you the other sort of flex cards that I am currently electing to play. But I think there is only about 3 or 4 of them. So this is only an 11 card extra deck, but that just shows you kind of how much room you have to work with to put other cards in. And this is really what I would deem mandatory right now with this particular variant of Speedroid Cash. is 2 copies of Rubber Band Shooter. I think 2 copies of Rubber Band Shooter transcends whatever build you really decide to play. This card is just so pivotal to how the deck is able to run and be consistent and get to the lines you want to be able to get to. Takes 2 wind monsters to be able to get into, and you can banish a wind synchro monster from your extra deck to reveal 2 Speedroid monsters from your deck whose levels equal the total level of the wind synchro that you banish, and that does banish for cost. So if you banish a 7, you can reveal a 5 and a 2, a 4 and a 3, 6 and a 1, right? But most likely, and most of the time, you're going to be revealing a 4 and a 3, whether it be Duke and Piper, or Double Yo-Yo and Terratop. And then it has another effect, which is arguably the best part about it, aside from its first effect, is the fact that you can gain an additional normal of a wind monster, but you get locked into synchros for the rest of the turn. So a lot of times that is what sets up that Terratop and Double Yo-Yo play, right? You might have already used your normal summon to get into this card, which is no surprise because this deck inherently just has a lot of normal summons in it. You'll see that especially when you look at the pure variant. A lot of normal summons, so the fact this card does that is kind of nice, just to, you know, make those excess normal summons you'll probably be drawing most of the time not completely dead in your hand. And it also synergizes well with the Kashtira engine because Unicorn does happen to be a wind monster, of course, so you can kind of reestablish your cash plays if you want to, if you don't have the Speedroid extenders necessary to make synchro plays after the fact. Then next up, for the particular, you know, the cash variant, I am running 2 copies of Draco Sack. I do like this a lot. Much like having the second burst, having the second Draco Sack just makes the cash engine so much more viable and grindy. It gives you more utility. And not to mention, going second, having 2 copies can come up because you can make the first one, use its effect attribute to pop something, and then use the rest of your cash engine to get into a second one, and then link into your Rubber Band Shooter with a token and Draco Sack, and then you have your Rubber Band Shooter and a token left over, and that gives you a lot of room to work with, right? Having that extra body on field to be able to synchro with your Rubber Band Shooter and whatever cards you decide to get off of it just helps out so much when trying to make plays in synchro climb, outside of just like having Terratop and Yo-Yo, because that is great to, you know, get Terratop or get Yo-Yo, bring back the Terratop and resolve it and be able to play just like that. But having that extra body, like I said, does give you so much more utility and so much more room to be able to do more impactful things. So that's why Draco Sack is so key in here, and that's why it's so great that the, you know, the cash cards work as well as they do. Moving on, our first pair of synchros here is our level 6 synchros. You can also play Adamancipator, Risen Raptite. That's sort of another card, but we'll save that for the tech card section. Stardust Charge Warrior. When it's summoned, you know, draw a card, right? And then it can attack all monsters, all special summon monsters opponent controls once each. So good consistency mid-combo. I love climbing into Baron with this. Or you can even go into, like, Juju if you play that. Or not Juju, sorry, Shen Shen. Then we do play Juju, because this card is a good single climb into Baron going second, kind of like how Stardust Charge Warrior is great to climb into it going first. We draw a card, it helps us draw into side deck cards, non-engine, more extenders, getting into our boss monster, and this card helps us to apply more removal and pressure by going second. You know, removing a card with Juju, then going to Baron and popping another card while resolving Piper in the process, ideally to get more card advantage. And in order to use Juju's removal effect, all you have to have in your graveyard is 2 monsters with the same type and attribute but different names. So in this case, it's going to be Wind Machines, or it could even be Earth Psychics with Fenrir and Scareclaw Cash, both being Earth Psychics. Yeah, then you can just target a card in the field, send it to the graveyard. Really good. And then if you have 2 monsters in your graveyard with the same type and attribute, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect. So that is also kind of a neat little effect. You can kind of sit on this, and your opponent really will have a hard time getting over it in some rare scenarios. So I like these. A lot of utility in just playing those 2. Of course, there is Raptite you can play, but I like those 2. Just always handy to have in the deck. And then we have 3 level 7 synchros. And first we'll look at this guy here, Clearwing Synchro Dragon. As I said, he hates level 5 or higher monsters. He has 2 effects. First being, once per turn, when another level 5 or higher monster activates effects in the field, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And then once per turn, when a monster effect is activated that targets 1 level 5 or higher monster in the field and no other cards, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster, right? And then if it destroys anything via that effect, it does gain the attack of the monster that it destroyed. So that, you know, kind of seems like a very situational effect and a very format dependent effect at that. Yeah, you know, you'd be right in thinking that, but this format, I think this effect finds a lot of purchase, especially against like the Fire King decks, right? And even against decks that play Kashtira cards, because this card just stops Fenrir, stops a lot of bestial monsters, right? Really strong card, but not always super strong. So in those formats, in those situations, this is your go-to target to banish off of your Rubber Band Shooter or your Pot of Prosperity. Next up, we have a copy of Wind Pegasus at Ignister here. This guy is a really great Synchro Climb option, much like your Stardust Charge Warrior is, but instead of drawing a card, you know, we set up our graveyard with an additional piece of interruption or an additional layer to the interruptions that our board has. Because if another card we control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect while this card is on the field or in the graveyard, you can banish this card, then target one card in the field as cost, shuffle it into the deck. That's really, really powerful effect just to be able to set up in the graveyard by going into Baron. And the other effect, it says during your main phase, you can destroy spells and traps your opponent controls up to the number of Ad Ignister monsters you control. So non-target spell and trap destruction. Very, very nice. You're always going to be popping one because we don't play any more Ad Ignister cards, but it still does come up in certain matchups. And then last but not least, we have the Clearing Fast Dragon, which is basically once per turn, quick effect, we can target a monster special from the extra deck and negate its effects and make its attack 0 until the end of the turn. So just a good monster to go into because a lot of decks are going to be going to the extra deck. So setting up an extra deck negate is always going to be nice. And the fact that it's a quick effect, right, and modifies attack, you know, you can use it in things like the damage step too, which is really, really cool. And moving on, we have the last sort of mandatory card in the extra deck to play. As I mentioned several times before, Baron de Fleur is the best boss monster this deck has, strictly because it is a wind monster, it's a synchro, and it's so incredibly easy to get into with how generic it is. Unlike some of the other boss monsters this deck has options for, like Cosmic Blazar Dragon, Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, Stardust Warrior, etc., right? Those cards are great. They are wind synchros, but they are so much harder to get into when compared to Baron de Fleur just being an outright Omni negate. And it does have that standby phase effect to recur level 9 or lower monsters from the graveyard, so that can help us kind of get out of a rut where we don't have any engine going. I mean, if we already spent its negate, we can bring out a Terratop, bring out a Unicorn, right? Try to reignite our engine all over again with that effect. And of course, it does have that pop effect. And we play two, not only because it's a fantastic card, right? But a lot of times we just end up making the second one sometimes in the same combo or as a follow-up sort of rebuttal on turn 3. You want to be able to reestablish this card just because, again, it's so freaking good in the deck. And why would we make two as well? Because during our combo, maybe we expend the negate, right? And again, this deck excels at making level 10 synchros, at least generic ones. So being able to climb and do a second one and then use the other one during the standby phase to tag out new Fenrir is just so, so good and something you definitely don't want to pass up. So yeah, that is it for the extra deck. Those are all the cards that I would deem mandatory. You could arguably take out one of the Draco Sacks, and then you have 10 cards in here that I would deem mandatory for this particular build. I'll really quickly show you guys the other cards that I'm electing to play right now here. Zeus, SP Little Knight, Praise Velgar the Desperate, Doom Eagle, and Donner Dagger for hire. And those are obviously for various reasons, right? For the amount of hand traps that I'm playing, the type of hand traps that I'm playing, which I'll really quickly go into as well since we're at this part of the video. I'm playing 2 Talents and a Call By. I'm also playing 3 Nibiru just because the format kind of calls for it. That's why the Donner is in the deck. 2 copies of Bell, format calls for it. And then of course your just go-to generic staples that seem to transcend time and space, Imperm and Ash Blossom. Those are the cards that make up the rest of the deck that we did not talk about when we were just looking at the bare bones. The side deck I'm not even going to bother talking about just because, again, the side deck is going to be so subject to change as time goes on. One thing I really do quickly want to talk about, though, is side decking patterns. Briefly, you know, you could definitely side out the Other Birth. You could side out a Terraforming. You could also side out a Tether Wolf. And you could also side out a Car Turbo. Those tend to be the go-to things that I side out engine-wise when playing this deck, usually going second. A lot of these cards will typically come out. But outside of that, that's really it. Yeah, I mean, there have been times where I have sided out a Fenrir going first just because I want to see Unicorns so much more. But these are typically the cards that I side out. And obviously the other things that I side out would be like non-engine in the deck that I currently am playing that doesn't necessarily suit being in the deck against whatever deck I'm playing against, right? If I'm playing against like Labyrinth, right, I obviously don't want Nibiru in my deck, or if I'm playing against like a deck like Fluandereeze, Bell's probably not going to make much sense, right? So those are going to come out. So yeah, those are some of the cards I would typically side out in the main deck. Going second, going first, it's probably just going to be what non-engine I'm playing. It's going to get sided out. Some non-engine, right? Nibs and Imperms might get replaced for some limits and judgments, etc., etc. You know, D-Shifter and Droll Lockbird, those are kind of cards that I would side in right now in the deck, going first and second against a whole host of different decks, specifically the Snake Eye Fire King deck. And you know, obviously just swap out various hand traps and things like that. But the core engine cards, like I said there, a Tetherwolf, a Card Turbo, a Birth, a Terraforming, maybe a Fenrir if I'm going first, right? But outside of that, it's pretty much just going to be those cards. I wouldn't side out anything else, really, just because you're just really putting a big, you know, damper on your engine if you side out any more than that. So yeah, that is it for the sort of speed cash deck profile part. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the pure variant. As promised, I said we'd be taking a look at a more pure variant for budget reasons, and I also understand most people might not be interested in playing the Kashtira version for whatever reason. So we're going to head over to Dueling Book here, where I'm going to show you guys a pure list, kind of how I would build it here in 2024, March of 2024. So here is the list, and as you can see, you know, I do have the hand traps or non-engine included in here, but you can basically just ignore those for now. It's kind of a sample loadout here, if you will, but we can just kind of get rid of all of those just to kind of look at the bare bones again, you know, engine of the deck, if you will. And there's a couple of specific things I want to talk about here, ratios of cards that are different compared to the Kashtira list, and cards that are in this list that were not in the other lists entirely, and vice versa as well. So the first thing you're probably noticing is there is only one Birth in here, and with far fewer Kashtira monsters in the deck, I think this makes sense. Could you get away with playing a second Birth? Yes, if you were willing to play like Raitsoth, if you had like one of those and a Terraforming, or maybe if you were going to play like Fenrir's as well as part of that non-engine suite, you could definitely add in a second Birth, but again, that's entirely up to you. And the other ratio here is the Dendaiko Duke that I have at 2 specifically, just because I feel like you're going to be going through your engine a lot more, especially with cards like Wheel and Hound, and the follow-up in this deck will probably need to be a bit stronger compared to the other deck, because you're going to be putting up, I think, a bigger board, and the Kashtira cards are going to be adding a presence to that kind of turn 3 push that this deck really won't be able to do unless you have things like that. But I was kind of messing around with it being at 1, so the Duke you could also leave at 1, because as you can tell, this deck is going to have a problem where you have too many normal summons, right? We're playing Ultra Hound, we're playing Terror Top, we're playing Marble Machine, Double Yo-Yo, the Dukes, we're also playing Piper and Red-Eye Die on top of that, right? So there is a lot more normal summons, a lot more chance to open poor, suboptimal hands. So if you kind of want to cut down on that, you could also, again, go down to the one of Dendaiko Duke, because we're also playing, we're making up for that by playing like the Red-Eye Die as well. But let's kind of look at the actual list now. We have 3 copies of Kashtira Unicorn, which we already talked about. 3 copies of Speedroid Ultra Hound, which is a card we have not looked at yet. This is, I think, one of the better normal summons for Speedroid. I like this card a lot better than Marble Machine. I know some people kind of like flip-flop on these ratios. They'll go like 1 Hound and 3 Marble Machine, and I totally get it, right? It can search out like extenders to hand instead of just sending them to the graveyard. But what I think a lot of people misunderstand about Hound is that it is a 1-card interrupt that helps you climb into Baron a lot easier, especially with Unicorn. It gives you better follow-up via its graveyard effect, and it can still send extenders all the same, like, you know, your Duke and your other tuners that you might want to set up in the graveyard, or set up things for speed recovery, etc., etc. It's also not a once per turn, and it doesn't block us like Marble Machine does. Not that that effect is really going to matter so much, but, you know, it's kind of one thing to take into account. But I like Ultra Hound a lot just because, again, it allows us to also get into Rubber Band Shooter without burning our, like, good extenders, you know, things like Tekatomborg, Car Turbo, etc., etc., can get us into Rubber Band Shooters by sending Duplicate, summoning the Duplicate, and then linking off into your Rubber Band Shooter, and then you still have things like Car Turbo and Tekatomborg to work with that you're ultimately going to be grabbing off your Terror Top, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But what does this card do, right? When this card is a normal summon, you can send one Speedroid card from your deck to the graveyard. During your main phase, except that when this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Speedroid monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, special summon one Speedroid Synchro monster from your extra deck with the same level but a different name, but negate its effects. So what you can do is basically go Hound effect, banish itself, target Terror Top, shuffle it back into the deck, and summon out your High Speedroid Cork Shooter. Of course, it will have its effects negated, but you can still bring out Cork Shooter as a level 3 tuner, which pairs very well with Hagoita, which we'll talk about later. And same could be said with shuffling something back like Rubber Band Plane as a level 5 target to either get access to Hagoita or to get access to Chanbara, which can help recycle our banished Speedroid monsters, etc., etc. So it's on Summon Foolish, not a hard once per turn. So as many times you're able to normal summon Ultra Hound on the turn, which is usually just going to be 2, you can resolve that effect. So if you normal summon it to start your combo, you can normal summon it again off something like Rubber Band Shooter and use that effect the second time. And the follow-up effect is one of the best things about it. And the other synergy too with Cork Shooter and Unicorn, which we'll get to later. Next up we have Terror Top. We already talked about it. Obviously we're still going to play 2 Terror Top. And now we have 1 Marble Machine. This is a card I've been slowly cutting down on as time goes on, especially with Terror Top now coming to 2. If Terror Top was still at 1, it'd probably still be 3 Hound, 2 Marble Machine, 1 Terror Top. But now that we have Terror Top back to 2, I think it's perfectly fine to cut Marble Machine back down in numbers. And what is Marble Machine? It's basically just the normal summon version of Terror Top, right? When this card is a normal summon, you can activate this effect, add 1 Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters the rest of the turn except for wind monsters. You can only use this effect of Speedroid Marble Machine once per turn. Why they put that restriction on it, I have no idea why they did that. But they did, right? And then its pendulum effect says once per turn, when your defense position monster is targeted for an attack, you can change it to face up attack position. Also, it cannot be destroyed by battle this turn, even this card leaves the field. So I think I've used that effect once in a real match, 1 time in all the years I've been playing this deck. So keep that in mind. It's not going to come up pretty much ever, but it might come up 1 time in the entire time you play this deck, right? 1 Double Yo-Yo. This card I kind of regretfully put in here just because it's just a great fallback to have when you are just going into Rubber Band Shooter in like the weirdest way possible. 2 wind monsters, right? Let's say it's Unicorn and Rubber Band Plane. You just need that guaranteed good power play of resolving Terror Top, which honestly is even better in this variant because we play the Red Eye die. Terror Top becomes a little bit more versatile as opposed to the other version where it's just a very small synchro toolbox in the cash version. And then next up we have 3 Speedroid Wheel, one of my favorite cards in this entire deck. It does have its downsides, of course, but I think this is a fantastic card in here. It's a starter, which I think is the most important thing. This deck for the longest time was lacking really good starters until this card came along. It's not perfect by any means. It definitely has its flaws, but it's a quick play spell that says discard 1 card, which is nice in of its own right because sometimes we want to get certain bricky cards out of our hand, and Wheel can help us to do that. You roll a 6-sided die, then special summon from your hand and or deck 1 or 2 Speedroid monsters whose total levels equal the result, but negate their effects. If you do not special summon, you lose 500 life points equal to the result times 500. So if you roll a result that you cannot actually summon, right? Let's say you roll a 4 and you have no possible way of summoning 1 or 2 Speedroid monsters level equal 4, you'll take, would be 4 times 5, 2,000 damage, right? So that's just kind of how that works. And you can only use it once per turn. You can only activate it once per turn. So if it's the activation is negated with something like Baron, you can use it again. Important thing to keep in mind. But this card is really, really great. There's a lot of plays you can do in the deck that just set this card up outright, like combos that we'll see later. Where you banish a 7 off of Rubber Band Shooter and reveal the Duke and Piper like we did in the other variant. But instead of, normal summoning either of one of them, you're just going to have Wheel discard whichever one you got. That way it kind of acts as like a double foolish burial. You get your Duke engrave, you get your Piper in graveyard, and then you can get one or ideally two free bodies on the field to be able to help resolve the Piper and then hopefully synchro climb into something of value, right? That's kind of the benefit there. Now, if you roll a 1, right, you're summoning Red Eye Die. If you roll a 2, you're summoning your Marble Machine. Some people play 2 Red Eye Die. I just cannot get behind that at all. Like, as you already can see, like, we have a problem of too many suboptimal normal summons in this deck. And I would rather just summon the 1 Marble Machine than go for 2 Red Eye Die, like, any day of the week, just to avoid drawing this card as much as possible. But yeah, and I guess another thing too is, like, you could play a second Marble Machine if you really wanted to. You can maybe cut down on the Duke, or you could cut the double yo-yo, honestly, or the rubber band shooter if you wanted to play 2 double yo-yo, so you have a higher chance of, like, if you do roll a 2, you know, your Marble Machine is still in deck somewhere, you can still summon it off of this, so that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, 3 Speedroid Wheel, 3 Techatomor we already talked about, 2 Car Turbo, 2 Duke, 2 Speed Recovery. This is a non-Speedroid card for some reason, but it says target 1 Speedroid monster in your graveyard, special summon it. During your main phase, except when this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 Speedroid monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So, not a once per turn monster reborn, and then it has that graveyard follow-up effect to add back, which is huge. So this card, low-key, even by modern day standards here in 2024, is still a really solid card in my opinion. This card, you could play at 3, but, you know, it does have a bigger activation requirement than some other cards like Hound or Terror Top or Unicorn, right? You gotta have something set up in grave, something optimal in grave, ideally, to bring back. And things like Terror Top only get their effect on normal or special summon. Like Hound doesn't get it, Marble Machine doesn't get it, right? So what it brings back, there are better choices than others, so I think playing it at 2 is fine. I wouldn't go to 1. 3 I also wouldn't blame you for, but again, if you want to kind of min-max things, I would say 2 is a good number. The 1 Burst we already talked about. Speedroid Rubber Band plane. This card I like in here a lot just because it helps facilitate some nice synchro plays like High Speedroid Kite Drake, which we'll talk about later. And then it gives Hound another option to be able to summon out level 5s instead of just level 3s. And it has just a decent effect on its own. It says, if a monster is special summoned to your field, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for this turn, except for wind monsters. Don't know why they have that restriction on there. And then it says you can only use this effective Speedroid Rubber Band plane once per turn. If this card is normal or special summon, you can target 1 face-up monster in the field. It loses 600 attack until the end of the turn. So, kind of a nice effect there to help go into boards. You could side it out if you wanted to, but I think it's a fair card going second. Then we have Piper, already talked about. Red Eye Die. This is a newer card, at least to this variant, if you've only seen the Speed Cash variant. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can target 1 Speedroid monster you control, except Speedroid Red Eye Die, or Dice, and declare a level from 1 to 6. It becomes that level until the end of the turn. So, really, really solid and strong level manipulation effect that helps us get into a bunch of different synchro plays, specifically with like Cork Shooter and stuff. And then we have 2 copies of Speedroid Duplicate, a card that I really like playing 2 in here, just because you can use Hound effect, send it, and then go into Cork Shooter to search it as an interruption. So it says basically, banish 1 wind monster from your graveyard, then target 1 card your opponent controls as cost, return it to the hand. So it's kind of like a compulse, but for anything, so long as you got a wind engraved to banish. Then during your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 level 2 or higher Speedroid monster you control. Reduce its level by 1 if you do special summon this card as a normal monster. So that effect is kind of like a level eater, and it's also a tuner when it comes out. It's a level 1 machine wind tuner, 0/0. Not treated as a trap, and it's a once per duel effect. But it's level eater, and it's a tuner, right? It's a crazy effect to be able to have. And that's why Hound is so good, because you can, for example, start by speccing Unicorn, searching out Birth, and then you can go normal Hound, send Duplicate, right? And then Duplicate effect to reduce a level off Hound, summon it. Synchro 3 for Cork Shooter, which allows you to add a spell or trap, Speedroid spell or trap on summon. Add the other copy, and then you can synchro with the level 3 tuner and the Unicorn into Baron. So all of just those 2 cards, you get kind of 2 to 3 interruptions, because you get the interruption from Birth, you get the interruption from Unicorn if you bring it back off of the Birth, you have Baron, and you have Duplicate. So that's a very high value combo. That's 4 disruptions, not including hand traps off of just 2 cards, which I think is pretty solid for a deck like this, considering that we're playing a very small cash engine. That's why I wanted to prioritize Ultra Hound in this build, because of that good synergy that you have, and then the follow-up effect on top of that. So that is it for the main deck. You can see there's 12, 13 room, 13 empty slots here, depending on what cards you do want to play and don't want to play. Like, if you wanted to play a second Marble Machine, right, like, where is it? So a second Marble Machine in here. If you want to do something like this, you definitely could. And then you have 11 room for non-engine, which is not bad. I think 11 to 13, I would say 13 is probably ideal, just so you can get over a 50% chance of seeing 2 or more. So, like, I think it's a 53% chance to see 2 or more non-engine going second, which is really strong. You want to have that today in today's day and age, where having a lot of hand traps against the Fire King deck is very important. Yeah, you could have it look like that. You want to slim down on normal summons and cards that are suboptimal, you could cut Marble Machine and Duke down to 1. But I think this is probably just completely fine. Now we move into the extra deck. We have cards in here that you guys have probably already seen, like the Rubber Band Shooter, the Draco Sack, which I am still opting to play in here just because Draco Sack is so good in this deck. And not to mention, like, you're not going to make it with just 2 unicorns, obviously. You can, like, still go, like, unicorn, right, summon it, get Birth, and then normal summon, or, like, normal summon Terror Top, and then, like, Tekatomborg tag into Piper, Excavate 2, synchro into, like, your Wind Pegasus, then overlay the Wind Pegasus and the Unicorn into Draco Sack effect, attach, right? You can do all that stuff still, and still, like, have that whole line available, even though you're not playing the cash variant. So I think it's a very solid card to still play in the deck regardless, so that's why I wanted to include here. It's kind of like a free spot in this variant. Could be a Link Monster, could be SP Little Knight, could be Doom Eagle, or any other links we played in the previous builds. But let's talk about the cards that we weren't playing in the other build, and the first one is probably one of my favorites, which is High Speedroid Cork Shooter, level 3 Machine Tuner Synchro. 1 tuner plus 1 non-tuner monsters. If it's synchro summon, you can activate one of these effects. Add a Speedroid spell trap from your deck to your hand. And as other effects, which is kind of crazy, if all materials that were used for the synchro summon of this card were Speedroid monsters and are all in your graveyard, special summon all of them. So one thing you can do is basically go Terror Top effect, search out Tekatomborg effect, tag out for dice, target the Terror Top, make it a level 2, and then synchro for 3, and then go Cork Shooter effect to bring back the dice and the Terror Top, trigger the dice again, because it's not a once per turn, and then you can make the Terror Top a 6, synchro 7 into Wind Pegasus, and then make Baron, right? By setting up the Wind Pegasus and Graveyard all off of one card, so that's kind of 2 disrupts off one card there. So great card here all around, and I like playing 2 just because we're playing so many Hound, right? Because you want to have that second copy to be able to summon off of your Hound on turn 3. Then next up we have High Speedroid Goita, which I think this is probably my favorite Speedroid monster, second maybe Kite Drake. It says 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters during the player's turn. You contribute this card as cost. Increase the levels of all monsters currently on the field by 1 until the end of this turn. So that effect can be kind of cool against Xyz based decks and synchro decks like Sword Soul or Sprite. It's been decent against those in the past, or like Phantom Knight. Very situational effect, but it does come up. But the other effect, the reason we're really playing it is because if this card is in your graveyard and you control a Speedroid Tuner monster, you can special summon this card. Also, you cannot special summon monsters this turn except for one monster. So if it's just in the grave and you have a Speedroid Tuner, you can just summon it back for free and make a synchro play from there. Next up, we have High Speedroid Chambara. This is a card that was played pretty generically back in the day, so some people might know what this card does, but a tuner plus non-tuner can make a second attack during each battle phase. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles, it gains 200 attack. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished Speedroid cards added to your hand. So this card helps to put on damage a lot. It can attack at 22 and then go up again to 24. And if you have Card Turbo applied, it will start at 28, attack at 3k, and then attack again at 3200. So that's just 6200 damage on its own. And then if you have Rubber Band Shooter on the field, it's going to be at 1800 because of Card Turbo, and that is 8000 damage exactly off of just Rubber Band Shooter and Chanbara. So that's easy way to go for game. Juju, you've seen this. Charge Warrior, you've seen it. Clearwing, you've seen it. Wind Pegasus, you've seen it. But Kite Drake, you have not yet if you are still new to the deck. Level 8 Synchro, 1 Wind Machine Tuner plus 1 non-tuner monster. If it's Synchro Summon, you can activate one of these effects. Either destroy all other cards in the field, or negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent currently controls. That is one of the craziest effects this card has. Just blanket negates, non-targeting, kind of an insane card, right? And just so good. And its other effect isn't bad either. It says that this card in your possession is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card. You can add one Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand. So if they're playing any sort of cards like Dogmatica Maximus, for example, it's the best thing I can think of. They make you send cards from your extra deck to the grave. Easy card to send right here is Kite Drake. You can search Terror Top, and you could load up your graveyard with Wind Pegasus as well. And then lastly, the newer card in here, the one that was not in the Speed Cash build, is 2 copies of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This card is so easy to make in here because of things like Hagoita. We can spam out Crystal Wings very easily. There's some combos we can even do where we can establish a Crystal Wing even after getting Nibiru'd. So Crystal Wing is just such a mainstay staple in most pure variants of this deck. It says once per turn, well, first of all, in order to summon it, you need a tuner plus a non-tuner synchro monster, and we're mainly going to be getting into that via level 5 tuner synchro, or tuner non-synchro, I should say. But sometimes you can get into it with Wind Pegasus and Red Eye Die, or you can even use Fukimadoshi Piper to make this a level 5 and synchro with it that way with a level 3. It's some ways I've gotten into this card before. But this card says, basically, once per turn, when another monster effect is activated, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card, and if you do that, this card gains attack equal to the destroyed monster's original attack until the end of this turn. If this card battles an opponent's level 5 or higher monster during damage calculation, this card gains attack equal to the current attack of the opponent's monster it is battling during that damage calculation only. So long story short, it's just a monster negate, and you can put 2 of them up on the board very easily with just the synchro engine. So those are the main differences. Those are the cards that we're playing in this build that we're not playing in the other build. I'll talk about other cards we could play later on in the sort of niche cards and tech section of this video. But yeah, this is pretty much it. Like I said, just to reiterate here, you could play Duke at 1, you could play Marble Machine at 1. It just becomes a little risky. You know, if you resolve wheel and you roll that 2 and you don't have Marble Machine left in deck, I feel like it's probably maybe a little bit more correct to play 2 Marble Machine. You can maybe slim down on the Duke. You could cut the Rubber Band plane. You could cut Yo-Yo. I wouldn't blame you for cutting Yo-Yo, because a lot of times when you do play this variant, you can banish a 5, banish Chanbara, and reveal Terror Top and Marble. And it's pretty much exactly the same as revealing Terror Top and Yo-Yo, because Marble and Terror Top are practically the same card. So you could get away with cutting the double Yo-Yo like this, which in fact, in the past times when I've played pure variants of Speedroid, I never ran double Yo-Yo. But again, I wouldn't blame you for doing it, right? So you just got to kind of find out what you like most. Just keep in mind, if you don't play double Yo-Yo, like I said, it's the same thing, just banishing Chamber off Rubber Band Shooter, revealing Terror Top and Marble Machine, and you can pretty much combo from there. So yeah, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the combo section of this video. But yeah, I think we're going to move on to the next section, which is going to be talking about tech cards. Cards that we weren't necessarily playing in either of these builds that you could play in the main or extra or even side deck. Honestly, some cool side deck options that particularly pertain to this particular strategy. So let's go ahead and hop into that right now. So here we are in the next segment of the guide video, and we're going to be talking about other tech cards slash engines, right? These are cards that you could play in either variant of the deck, although I will try to distinguish which cards might work better in pure or might work better in the Speed Cash variant. But yeah, all cards to consider, all engines to consider at many points of playing the deck, no matter how you play it. These are all options that are available to you, and as you can see, there are quite a few. There's also some cards I put in here that I want to talk about because I don't think they're worth playing, and I'll tell you guys about those cards when we get to them, right? Some of you might already be able to know which those cards are. Well, let's start right at the beginning here. We have the Ascended of Thunder. So this is more of a Speed Cash replacement card, although you could technically play it in the pure build if you are running unicorns. But it says, You can special summon this card from your hand by paying 3,000 life points. If special summoned this way and its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card by battle or card effect, gain 5,000 life points. Yeah, it's a level 7, right? It's just a free level 7 body, free, that allows you to get into your Draco Sack plays. In fact, this is what we were playing in the Speed Cash deck before Pressured Planet Raidsoth, I think, came out, or Scareclaw Kashtira came out. So you were really just working with Fenrir, Unicorn, Birth. So this gave you just more copies of free level 7s to get onto the board to be able to do that play. So if budget is an issue, you can't get your hands on Fenrirs, this is definitely a great way to kind of get around that, because I was playing this at locals, you know, before Raidsoth even came out. So you could technically run that. And then the same thing can be said with Wandering Griffin Rider, right? It's the same concept. It's a level 7 wind. Even better than, I guess, the Ascendant of Thunder, because this is a wind monster. This is not. But you could argue the Ascendant of Thunder is easier to get out than the Wandering Griffin Rider, because this needs no monsters. And then you have Harpy's Pet Dragon, Fearsome Fire Blast, which is kind of a balance between the two. This one just says you need to control a level 6 or lower wind monster. You can summon it from your hand in defense position, right? It's other effect where you can send a winged beast. If it's sent from field to the grave, doesn't really apply anymore. It would apply if Wind Barrier statue was still legal, because there were some plays where you could like summon this, synchro into Baron. This would drop the Wind Barrier statue to the grave, and then Baron could revive the Wind Barrier statue in the opponent's turn. And that would be in a combo where you're making 2 Barons. So you end on Baron plus Wind Barrier statue. Fortunately, well, unfortunately and fortunately, we can't do that anymore, because it also means Philanderies can't do it anymore. But yeah, the concept is other level 7 wind monsters that you can play that aren't Unicorn, or level 7 monsters that aren't Fenrir, right? So yeah, just figured I'd throw those in there. And then we have 2 more cards that are kind of along the same lines. They're just free wind extenders, which help us get into Rubber Band Shooter with using less of our actual in-engine extenders. First, we have Primitive Butterfly. This card I think I like better than the next card we're going to be talking about, which is Red-Haired Hasty Horse. This card I like a little bit better for 2 reasons. One is that it is a, you know, free special summon that cannot be played around. Just you need to have no monsters. You can summon it, and that's not once per turn. If it gets bounced back to hand, you can summon it again. A good interaction would be against like Hieratic Seals of the Heavenly Spheres. You can spec this, go battle phase, try to run it over. If they bounce it back, you can just summon the Primitive Butterfly in main 2, so long as you still have no monsters. And then it has the ability to increase the levels of all insect monsters currently in the field by 1. So that can make it either level 5 to go into things like Kite Drake, or it can become a level 6 to go into things like Baron with Fukimeroshi Piper. So this card has a lot of utility. And that's really one of the main reasons why you could play it, right? I think Unicorn has pretty much made cards like these obsolete, but I'm just showing you guys all the options. Red-Haired Hasty Horse, level 5, wind. If there's a column with no cards, you can special summon this card from your hand and attack position to your zone in that column. You can only special summon Red-Haired Hasty Horse once per turn. This way, if another card is placed in this card's column, destroy this card. Once per turn, you can have this card's original attack for this turn. And if you do, it can attack directly this turn. So that effect, kind of mediocre at best. The other effect where it says, you know, if something else shows up in its column, just blows up, that can be so easily played around. If your opponent has a brain, they can just kind of build their board where they're just turning this card off inherently by occupying every column. And it's just so easy to play around. It's such a gimmicky effect, but it technically is still a free wind extender. But I think Primitive Butterfly is probably much better, but I wanted to show it. Next up, we have an engine here, which is an E-Tele engine. So these 3 cards are all kind of bundled together, if you will. Emergency Teleport, we all know what that does, right? Summon a level 3 or lower psychic monster from your hand or deck, but banish it during the end phase. And we have some really great level 3 wind psychic tuners to be able to bring out off of this, which help make our other Speedroid extenders like Takatomborg and Card Turbo live. But it also helps us to facilitate synchro plays, Xyz plays, you know, link plays even. And the first card we have is Virtual World Hime Nian Nian. This is just a way to synchro climb into 6s or 7s. It's a wind, help you link climb into things like Rubber Band Shooter. But it has another effect that says if a level 3 monster is normal or special summon to your field while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card as a tuner, but banish it when it leaves the field. And also for the rest of the turn, you can only special summon level/rank 3 or higher monsters. And then if it's banished, you can target one of your other banished cards, shuffle it into the deck. So That's kind of a neat effect, can help recycle things that you have banished off of Rubber Band Shooter, or things like Duke or Car Turbo things that have been banished, right? So it's kind of good recycling type effect. And it's kind of like a double extender. You can get it off E-Tele to either link with or synchro with, and then you can use its graveyard effect again to become out as a tuner, and then synchro with something else again. So it has a lot of utility. Just the problem with the E-Tele engine is it's 5 cards, because you're going to be playing 3 E-Tele, and Nian and Pilica. And Nian and Pilica also just not always going to be the best cards to draw. You'd rather just, not see them ever, and then you always draw E-Tele. It just does give the deck that little bit more kind of extender power, because the deck, while it does have great extenders, it's kind of limited in the extenders that it does have, right? Car Turbo, Tekkatomborg, Duke, just to name a few. Those are really your main extenders. You tend to go through them pretty quickly, so having other options on the table sometimes is nice to increase the power ceiling, but also at the cost of consistency. Next up, we have Pilica, Descendant of Gusto, a level 3. It says when this card is normal or special summon, you can target one wind tuner monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in face-up defense position. Its effects are negated. I wish it didn't say that, but if you activate this effect, you not special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except wind monsters. Big whoop, right? The whole deck wind locks us pretty much anyways. But yeah, it's just a E-Teleable extender. Revives something out of the grave, sets up a synchro play, so you can bring out Dice, you can bring out Duke, Car, you can bring out even the Fukimadoshi Piper, because it doesn't matter what level it is, you can bring out any wind tuner from your graveyard. So even if you are playing something like Ghost Warrior Moonlit Chill, that's also another reason you could want to play that card in this deck if you are playing the E-Tele engine, because it's just another potential target for Pilica to be able to revive, so the card isn't dead. But you can kind of get the gist of this, right? Good wind extenders help kind of boost the ceiling of the deck. I'll talk about this last here. But next we have the Wind Witch engine, which is pretty much adept at making Crystal Wing at the cost of playing a lot of engine requirements. I think the typical ratio is like 3 Ice Bell, 1 to 2 Glass Bell, and then 1 Snow Bell. But it helps to make like Crystal Wing but indestructible, because you're gonna synchro with like Wind Pegasus at Ignister and this into Crystal Wing. And then it says a synchro summer, a monster that was synchro summoned using this card as synchro material cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So like it's kind of cute, but in my opinion, is it worth the extra engine that could be non-engine and the potential bricks in the deck just to make Crystal Wing, even though the deck can already make Crystal Wing on its own? In my opinion, no, it is not worth it. I know some people swear by this. I cannot understand it for the life of me, but it's something you could play, right? If you like Wind Witch cards, then, go for it. The last thing I want to talk about is Happy Guidance of Horus. Could you play a Horus engine deck, a Horus engine in Speedroids? Yes, you could. Happy is a wind monster. That's really the only reason I pulled it out, is because it is a wind monster. It's a level 8, which kind of sucks. You don't really have any good Synchro 9 plays in this deck outside of Shen Shen, but that's going to require you to have a level 1 tuner like Red Eye Die. So take with that what you will. You could play like Imsetis, King Sark, and a Happy, maybe multiple Happy, like 2 Happy if you really want to be bold. But yeah, it's a wind monster. It's good. I don't know. I just threw it in here as kind of food for thought. But now we're going to move into the side deck tech. And it's side deck cards slash like cards that I have an inherent problem with being in the deck. But first and foremost, we have Goes in Match. It is newly limited, but with Fukimadoshi Piper, Pot of Prosperity, we have so many ways to potentially get to this one of, and it is so good, because obviously most of the time we're ending on all wind monsters. Gravity Collapse, this card is insane. Every time there's like one of those like rogue only tournaments, if I bring Speedroid, I usually toss Gravity Collapse in the side deck because it's kind of broken. Very high risk, high reward card. It says when your opponent would summon a monster or monsters, you can send a face-up synchro monster you control to the graveyard, negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster, and your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end of this turn. So that's kind of crazy. It is kind of crazy. Just a blanket, no summons for you. This deck can obviously put up synchros very easily. One of the best cards to be able to do that with is something like a Goita, we talked about in the deck profile segment, the level 5. You can just kind of bring that back at the end of your combo and then have Gravity Collapse it away during the opponent's turn. And again, Piper, Prosperity, we have a high chance of seeing this card instead of just trying to draw it for opening, opening 5. So it's kind of a cracked card. And synergy with obviously the deck being primarily synchro based. And then we have Harpy's Featherstorm, right? There is a way to potentially make this card live in here. I mean, sure, most of you people know what this card does if you played against Fluanderees. Basically, if you have a Winged Beast monster, until the end of the turn, negate any monster effect your opponent activates. And if you control a Harpy monster, you can activate this card from your hand. So there's a couple cards we can make. We can make Totem Bird, right? This is a 2 level 3 wind monster. Xyz, generic spell trap card, negate by detaching 2 materials and negate the activation. If you destroy it, loses the under attack while it has no materials. But you can also make Cyber / Harpy Lady, which is a winged beast. It's a Harpy monster, which will allow us to fire this card from hand, which is kind of insane. And this card on its own is not terrible. But level 8 synchros don't really come up all that often. In the speed cash variants, 7s, 6s, and 10s are more viable in that. The pure variant, 8s could probably come up more with 5s and 3s, like your Hagoitas, your Chanbaras, your Rubber Band Planes, and your host of level 3 tuners that we get access to. So I'd say this potential option is more viable in pure speed. But yeah, there is a way to potentially abuse Harpy's Featherstorm alongside Gravity Collapse in this deck. So I mean, in a format right now where you're playing an underdog deck like this, having something super unfair in the side deck like this is really nice. But the big problem is, the big flaw with these cards over something like Solemn Judgment per se, is that Solemn Judgment is always going to be live if you brick or not, if you get hand trapped and interrupted or not. That is the big trade-off. It might not seem like that big of a deal, but it is a big deal when trying to play in a real competitive setting. Sometimes you're going to get hand trapped. Sometimes you're going to get nibbed trying to set up these really niche, powerful cards. And then they just sit there and they laugh at you because you don't have a way to resolve them. And if you brick in such a way where you aren't able to get to the combo pieces and cards necessary to make these cards live, again, they're also just going to be dead. Whereas Solemn Judgment, in either scenario, shines, whether you bricked, got hand trapped, or full comboed, right? Of course, these cards seem a little bit more broken than Solemn Judgment, but it's a trade-off, right? Which do you value more? Next up, we have Win and Scratch. Speedroid Scratch. I think it's like the newest Speedroid card that we've gotten. It's a generic normal spell. Send a Speedroid card from your hand to the graveyard as cost. So you cannot use this under Shifter-like effects, which a lot of decks play Shifter right now. So that could be a problem in of its own. But you add a Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand, and you can only activate 1 per turn. So not only do we have to go -1, but we have to discard a Speedroid card in particular to get that -1. And on top of all that, this card inherently plays harder into things like Ash, Androl, and Lockbird. On top of its activation requirement just being so terrible. It's just bad. It's just a bad card. Do not play this card in Speedroid at all. Unless you absolutely have to, right? Then do it, because you're missing other cards that were shown in either of these builds. Just do not play this card. This card is terrible. It's an insult that they even printed it. Then next up, we have Win the Wind Channeler, which, in my opinion, if you had to choose one or the other, Win or Scratch, I would say go with Win. Win is 1,000 times better, because what it does is just wider range, right? We can discard another wind monster, so it doesn't have to be a Speedroid card. We can discard any wind monster. I think that is far better of an activation requirement than a Speedroid card specifically. And also take note that the cards do not have to hit the graveyard either, so you can still use it under Dimension Shifter and other effects like it. And then you get to add a wind monster with 1,500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. So, again, this can add things that aren't Speedroid monsters, right? That is more utility at the end of the day. So I think you can even add Tetherwolf, if I'm not mistaken. I think Tetherwolf might have... No, you can add Tetherwolf off that, right? So that is just another example. You could add Primitive Butterfly. You could add Pilica. You could add Nian, right? You could add any of the Windwitch girls, right? You could do that, right? It still sucks, though, right? Same reason goes for Scratch, right? It plays into hand traps so much more. It plays into Droll and Lockbird so much more. These cards make your hands like 3-card combos, right? because if you have like Win the Wind Channeler plus Dendon Daiko Duke, which typically this is a great combo. It's a great 2-card combo, but if we're, you know, being realistic with ourselves, we need to have a plan B to where that card gets ashed, which Ash is a very popular card in Yu-Gi-Oh! It has been for a long time, and it's going to continue to be. We want to make our deck as resilient to hand traps as possible, and not playing cards like these is just the way to go about doing that. Yeah, it's got another secret effect where it says when a wind monster you control is destroyed by battle, while this card is in your hand, you can special summon this card. So that is also a little bit more utility, being a level 5 monster, potentially stick onto the board, block damage, right? Etc., etc. But the main gist is just that these cards are just too expensive to use, and the things that they search are just not valuable enough, because we could just play more starters that are already just starters instead of cards that get starters. And in doing that, we just make the deck more hand trap resistant, because we aren't doing something all the time that says like, hey, please don't hand trap this. And if it does get hand trapped, you got to have a follow-up, and a good one at that. So most combos with these cards, they got to be realistically 3-card combos, which is not something you want to rely on. Last but not least, we have Speedroid Malicious Magnet, level 1 tuner, 0/0, cannot be used as single material except for the synchro summon by its own effect. During your main phase, if this card is normal or special summon, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon one wind monster using only this card you control and that monster. So this card I always see here and there in Speedroid profiles occasionally, and it's weird sometimes to see people play it without kaijus in the side deck, just because you want to be able to have a guaranteed way to resolve Malicious Magnet, by being able to like drop a kaiju on something and then Tekatomborg tag in a magnet effect, synchro with a kaiju into kite drake effect, blow up the field, right? That is a nice play to be able to have, because you get to remove something with a kaiju, and then you get to remove everything else ideally that was protecting everything else that you kaiju, like a Baron for example, and then kite drake gets rid of it all. It's a very mediocre card. It's format dependent. Like if you're playing a Link heavy format or an Ixies heavy format, this card is just going to be absolutely terrible. That's why I don't like it that much. That's why I put it in like the side section here along with Win and Scratch, because, you know, in order to take away the fact that how good it is going to depend on what your opponent is playing and how they're playing. You know, you have to put the kaijus with it, right? All that stuff is stuff to take into account. But it is there technically if the format is, you know, good for it. Now we're going to go into the extra deck here, where we have things like Cosmic Blazar Dragon, Big Boss Monster. You can get into this with a certain combo. I may show it off later. It's not worth it in my opinion. You have to play Speedroid Puzzle. You have to play Hagoita. Getting into this card, as you can see, 1 tuner synchro plus 2 plus non-tuner synchro monsters. So it's just so hard to get into for an effect that honestly Baron basically does on its own. When your opponent activates a card or effect, negate the activation, you destroy that card, and then it banishes itself until the end phase. When your opponent would summon a monster, you can negate the summon if you destroy that monster, and then when your opponent monster declares an attack, you negate the attack and end the battle phase. So like, it's just harder to make Baron, but is it cool to be able to make a 4K level 12 big space dragon? Absolutely. Next up, we have High Speedroid Clearwing Rider. I've got him on the back of my phone for a reason. This card borders right on the line of being playable and unplayable. 1 wind tuner plus 1 non-tuner wind synchro monster. So I think out of all the big wind boss monsters that Speedroid can make, that aren't Baron de Fleur, this is probably the easiest one to get into, and it's great because it solves one of Speedroid's problem, which is the lack of recyclability. You don't have a very easy way to recycle your engine. This is one of the few cards that can do that, but it does it in a very bad way. Once per turn during your main phase, you can roll a 6-sided die and shuffle wind monsters from your graveyard into your deck up to the result. Then you can destroy cards your opponent controls up to the number shuffled, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack for each card destroyed by this effect until the end of this turn. During your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you contribute this synchro summon card, special summon up to 2 level 7 wind synchro monsters with different names from each other from your extra deck. So that right there is so good that they printed that on the card, because it makes this card great going first and second. You can just set it up going, you know, first, and then tag into 2 wind synchros that you wouldn't have been able to make like on your own turn 1. So there have been combos where I'll like make Baron and then I'll make this, and then you just tag out as soon as you can into like clearing and clearing fast dragon on the opponent's turn. So you just turn it into 2 interruptions, which is kind of nice. This card would be even better if there were actual good level 7 wind synchros outside of clearing and clearing fast dragon. There just really aren't any, which is kind of unfortunate. Outside of that, you have Wind Pegasus and maybe Maple Maiden to consider as cards to be able to bring out off of this. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting effect. Great going second option, great going first option. Could they be better? Yeah. Is it still a little harder to make? Yes. Does it look cool? Yeah, it's a bike with a dragon. Then we have Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon. This card would be in my extra deck right alongside Baron if it wasn't worded the way that it is. It says 1 tuner synchro monster plus 1 non-tuner clearwing monster. I would have played this card if it said one tuner, right? But it says 1 tuner synchro monster. And in my opinion, that's what kills it. Because using a non-tuner clearwing monster, fine. We make those all the time in pure Speedroid or Speed Cash. Very easy to do. But the tuner synchro, you're really only ever making that in pure, not in cash, which I think is the better variant competitively speaking. But yeah, its other effect is so good. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can activate this effect until the end of this turn. This face-up card is unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters. Also, this card gains attack equal to that opponent's monster's original attack. Once per turn, when a spell/trap card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can negate the activation if you destroy that card. If this synchro summon card you control is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card, you can add a wind monster from your deck to your hand. So it can just become outright unaffected by monster effects, gains the attack of the monster you responded to, spell, trap, negate, and if it dies, you get to search any wind. That's like an absolute unit of a card. It's just so hard to get into. And then Baron is just better because it's generic and it's just an Omni Negate and a tag out. It's like so good. This card looks great. The effects are great. It's just so hard to get into, which really kills it, honestly. Then we have Virtual Kyubi Shen Shen. This is a card that I have played religiously, actually, in Pure Speedroid back in the day when Auroradon was illegal. This card is really good in certain metas, right? Any card sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. So that can be, again, really good in some metas. Some decks outright cannot play under this card. And then it says, when your monster declares an attack, you can return 1 banished monster to your owner's graveyard. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish 2 other monsters from your graveyard with different original types and attributes from each other, especially from this card from your graveyard. So it's a macro. It can recycle banished cards, and it can reborn itself if you have the right stuff in the grave, which if you are playing a lot of hand traps in your deck, this card can very easily be brought out because you can like banish a Tekatomborg and an Ash Blossom, you know, fire, wind, zombie machine, easy to bring it back out onto the field. It just sucks that it's a level 9. Level 9 synchros can come up in both variants, more likely to come up in the pure, but Speed Cash even less likely, and it just feels underwhelming sometimes to go for when you're, especially if it means you're giving up a Baron, right? So that's the Kyubi Shen Shen. Then we have Cyber / Harpy. Not only can this be paired with something like Harpy's Featherstorm, but it's just a decent level 8 synchro to go into. It is a wind monster, so you can obviously still make it if you're wind locked, which will happen. 1 tuner plus 1 plus non-tuner monsters. For this card, synchro summon, you can treat 1 Harpy monster you control as tuner. As a tuner, this card's name becomes Harpy Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. When a spell / trap card or effect is activated, except in the damage step, quick effect, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls or 1 Harpy monster you control, return it to the hand. So, yeah, against like the Snake Eye deck, or even against decks like Labyrinth that are using spells and traps a lot, this effect holds a lot of value. You can pair it with things like Duplicate and use it in response to that, or if you have a set wheel, you can chain it in response to that to get that extra free compulse type effect. Kind of good, obviously very meta dependent, but yeah, it is what it is, right? Not the greatest card. It's the reason why it's in this section and not in the actual profiles. Next up, Maple Maiden. This is a card I have actually cited, I think, recently, and by recently I mean within the last year or so, because it helps Goes and Match to be a lot more unfair. If this card is special summon, you can declare one attribute. This card gains the following effect. All face-up monsters become that attribute. So yeah, you can just call Wind when you summon it, and then everything that hits the field while this is on the board just becomes Wind. And obviously, if your opponent puts a Snake Eye Ash on field and it's a fire, then becomes Wind because of Maple Maiden, you flip up Goes and Match, and now they're screwed unless they have an actual Wind to put on field, thanks to kind of the Maple Maiden Goes and Match lock. Then it has another effect that says you can target one monster zone in your opponent's main monster zone. Your opponent must send one card from among its adjacent monster zones or spell and trap zones to the graveyard. Kind of a random effect, but yeah. Mainly makes Floodgates better, specifically Goes and Match. Raptite is a level 6 DD Crow, so long as you got a Wind. That's pretty much what it is. During your opponent's turn, if a Wind monster is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can target one card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. It's kind of a worse Doom Eagle because it's only during the opponent's turn, and you have to have a Wind engrave. But the benefit of this card over Doom Eagle is that this banishes any card, whereas Doom Eagle only shuffles back monsters. Kind of a toss-up, right? Next up, we have High Speedroid Kendama, the other of the two Speedroid synchros that we can technically play. Says if this card attacks level 6, it inflicts piercing damage to your opponent, and then it has two other effects, the first of which is the real reason why we could consider playing this card. It says you can banish a machine-type monster from your graveyard, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So obviously, this is a potential time card to play. I did side this for a couple weeks, actually recently, like a month ago, or even less than that, in my side deck for time. But I was only playing at locals with it and online, and time really doesn't play into account in those scenarios for me, so I just took it out. But if you are going to an event with a deck like this, please consider Kendama in the side. You'll thank yourself later for having a potential time option in the side deck, and it's in engine. And its other effect is not bad either. It says if this card is in your graveyard and you control no cards, you can special summon this card. You cannot normal summon set until you activate this effect. I don't know why it says that, but yeah, it's just a free body potentially, and it does piercing. Next up, High Speedroid Puzzle. This card is it's kind of cute. It's kind of cute. That's pretty much all there is to say about it. You really only play this in a variant of the deck that tries to turbo out Cosmic Blazar Dragon, because you're going to be making Blazar with Cork Shooter, Hagoita, and this. Yeah, that's 5, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so that's pretty much how you make it. Outside of that, you don't really ever use this card. Maybe there'll come a day where this becomes more viable, but it says at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a special summon monster, you can make this card's attack become double its current attack, which is kind of nice. If you card turbo this, it goes up to 21, and then use its double attack effect, it goes up to 4,200 for a level 4 synchro. Is kind of crazy. Until the end of the damage step. Once per turn, during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because the synchro summon card was sent there from the field this turn, target a spirit monster graveyard, add it back. So it's kind of recursion if you synchro climb with it, which is kind of nice. Totem Bird, just a generic spell trap negate to be able to make, also again synergy with the Harpy's Featherstorm. Cicada King, Wind rank 3 to be able to make. These cards, like, Gossip Shadow, a monster negate, basically a monster negate, spell trap negate. These 3 rank 3s are really good if you play the E-Tally package, because you have like greater options and like opportunities to be able to make rank 3s. So I'd only ever consider these cards if you ever played the E-Tally package, but you could also technically play them without it. And then we have Wind the Wind Charmer, Verdant. This card I was playing in a speed cache, just because you can like link off Nibiru tokens, or Nibiru itself to go into this, and then take like Droll and Lockbird out of the opponent's grave, or a Kashtira Unicorn, some kind of like familial common ground wind monsters. You'll see this format, even things like Ghost Mourner, Moonlit Chill, and then you can either link into Rubber Band Shooter, or you can link into SP Little Knight, or you can link into Doom Eagle, right, etc., etc. So this card opens up a lot of options, more so I think in the speed cache variant, although you could technically play it in pure. But yeah, and then obviously it's effective, it's destroyed, or it hits the grave. You can add a wind monster with 50 or less defense from your deck to your hand. So kind of cool, is what it is. Also, one other card I should mention in here is Small World. This card I did actually play recently in tournaments, in Speed Cache. There is some cool synergy, especially main deck Shifter and Nibiru and things like that, or mainly Shifter and Droll because like they're both spellcasters. So you can go like Shifter and Droll into Terror Top because, you know, Shifter and Droll are both spellcasters, and then both Terror Top and Droll are both wind monsters. They don't match anywhere else. And there's other ways you can like bridge with hand traps into Speedroid cards, into cash cards, right? The more time you think about it, the better this card becomes. It's decent. I never really liked it that much in the deck, and I think I just prefer not playing it. Also, I probably should throw these in here too. Enemy Controller is great in the Speed Cash variant. Omega, I guess, could technically be played if you play Effect Veiler, because you can go like, you know, Special Summon Fenrir, search out Unicorn, normal summon Veiler, Synchro and Omega, rip a card out of their hand, special summon Unicorn, grab Birth, bring back Fenrir, go into Draco Sack combo. That's kind of a cool thing you can do, but only if you play Veiler, and that means you're probably not playing Zeus in the extra deck. And obviously with Econ, you could also probably throw in Forbidden Droplet as well. Kind of same synergy. Clearing things off your field, dodging effects, taking cards, negating effects, opening up the field for things like Terror Top or your Kashtira monsters. And also, while I'm adding cards in here, Pegratops is another card. It's a good side deck option, great going set card. It's a level 7. Good synergy with the Speed Cash variant. And I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover for Speedroid Tech. If you guys have any feedback, any other cards you'd like to add to this list, drop them down in the comment section below for the good people, in case I missed something, because I probably did. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this segment. Now brings us to the combo section of the video. I have worked through, I think, 7 different combos to share with you guys. Now, I think a couple months ago I did post on the channel a dedicated Speedroid Kashtira combo video. I will be recommending you watch that video right now. I'll leave a card for that up in the top right hand of the video, but I will also be recommending a suite of other videos for you guys to check out towards the end of this video when we get to the concluding section. But I wanted to show a couple combos from that video. I didn't want to show all of them, obviously, because it's a bit redundant. Like, you can see a couple of them from that video, and if you want to go see the other ones, you can go check that video out if you'd like. Showing off some of the more important ones, a going first combo, a going second combo, and then I also have a couple of pure Speedroid combos to show you guys, because those combos vary greatly compared to the Speedroid Kashtira combos that we're going to be taking a look at. So let's head over to Dueling Book. Let's shrink the face cam down here, and let's take a look at our first combo here. So this is a Speed Cash combo, as you can tell. We have Unicorn, the best Speedroid starter outside of Terror Top, and Fenrir. This is all you're going to need. You can also have Planet replace when these are terraforming, right? Doesn't make too big of a difference. So just any two combination of these guys. It doesn't matter how you get to them. So special summon the Unicorn, activate its effect, grab Birth, normal summon Fenrir. Fenrir's going to go ahead and grab Scareclaw Kashtira. If you've already got Scareclaw Kashtira, just grab another Unicorn for follow-up. Then we're going to go ahead and overlay into Mechaphantom Beast Draco Sack. Draco Sack will detach to summon 2 tokens, and then we're going to link off a token and a Draco Sack here into the Rubber Band Shooter. We're doing this because we want this crucial level 3 non-tuner body on field to be able to do synchro plays with, right? Leaving the Draco Sack on board, while it does provide value in future turns, isn't worth it for what we're trying to do here as we combo. Now, we're going to go ahead and activate Rubber Band Shooter's effect and reveal Denden Daiko Duke and Fuki Madoshi Piper. Now, with this being sort of an RNG type combo, which card you get to the hand and which card goes to the graveyard will change what you are able to do, right? So I personally think that getting the Denden Daiko Duke to the hand is the better of the two outcomes, but as you'll see here in just a moment, getting Fuki Madoshi Piper is also really good too, as we're able to avoid the synchro lock in such a way where we use the Duke, right, to bring out the Piper, bypassing the need to use the additional normal and thus synchro locking ourselves. We bring out the Piper. Piper's going to go ahead and excavate, would be 2 in this case, If you wanted to, you could get greedy here and use the Birth to bring back Unicorn to excavate 3 instead of 2, but that plays super hard into Nibiru, and I personally like holding the Birth until the tail end of the combo, or at least until I've established some way to play around or stop the Nibiru outright. So we're just going to say, for the sake of this and sake of simplicity, we get Ash Blossom or some form of unusable non-engine to our hand, ideally going to be in the form of a hand trap or side deck card. So we get that, and then we're going to go ahead and Synchro 7. You could go into FA Dawn Dragster, you could go into Clearwing Synchro Dragon, Clearwing Fast Dragon, Wind Pegasus at Ignis, or whatever floats your boat. I'm just going to go into Clearwing Synchro Dragon here, doesn't really matter. Then we're going to use Scareclaw Kashtira, banishing the Fenrir, summoning that to the board, and then we're going to link into the SP Little Knight. And now we're going to use Birth here to bring back Fenrir, because now if our opponent decides to Nibiru, we can chain SP Little Knight to kind of tag out and dodge losing these monsters to Nibiru. So we end on SP Little Knight, Fenrir, Clearwing, Birth, and ideally 1 hand trap in hand, plus we would have 3 other cards in hand, so 1, 2, 3, 4 disruptions plus 4 cards in hand, ideally one of them being a hand trap. So that's kind of how this combo plays out here. Now we're going to kind of just go ahead and take a look of how it would play out differently if we get the Duke to hand instead of the Piper. So I've quickly rewound to the point where we would get the Duke instead of the Piper, and we're going to go ahead and start by activating Scareclaw Kashtira, getting that onto the field, and then activating Rubber Band Shooter's additional normal summon effect to additional normal when monster. It's going to be Duke here, then we're going to Synchro 10 into Baron. Now, this would be the most ideal point for them to hit us with Nibiru, and if they do hit us with Nibiru, we can still go ahead and use Birth to bring back Fenrir, or we could bring back Unicorn and then Duke for Piper and excavate 1 still, and then we could still make SP Little Knight on top of that. We wouldn't get to use its on summon effect since we would not synchro or summon it using a extra deck monster, but those are all things you still technically can do. You could just leave the Unicorn, that way you have Birth plus Unicorn and still get the excavate 1 off of Piper. Better than nothing. Not the greatest, but you still have some plays to be able to make if we do get hit with Nib before we synchro with the Scareclaw Cash and the Duke. But if they don't, we go into the Baron, and then we use Birth here since we have that sort of layer of protection from a hand trap. We bring back the Unicorn. The reason I'm bringing back the Unicorn here is so we can excavate 4 cards, basically resolving a Prosperity here. And we're going to say again, we get a piece of non-engine, and we can synchro again into a Clearwing Synchro Dragon or Fast Dragon, whatever it is. You could also go for Dawn Dragster here. You could bring back the Fenrir and only excavate 3, right? It's completely up to you. You kind of have to use your own best judgment when building these boards, as varied as they can be, because, you know, you can kind of tailor make them to play the best against whatever it is you're playing, right? So a lot of options on the table. It's kind of one of the reasons that makes this deck so difficult to play, is that reason alone. But yeah, that's the first combo. Let's go ahead and take a look at the second combo, another Speed Cash combo. Cool line you can do going second. So for this combo here, how you get into it doesn't matter. I'm going to be using Unicorn and Mecha Phantom Beast Tetherwolf. You could do the same 2 cards that we started with in the last combo. Unicorn and Fenrir doesn't make a difference. You could use Fenrir and Tetherwolf here. Again, it doesn't matter. You just need a way to get into Dracosac. That's really about it. So we're going to start by special summoning the Unicorn, activating its effect here to go ahead and grab ourselves a copy of Birth. I think Unicorn, though, is definitely the best, just because having access to Birth later in the combo can potentially get you a free extender, right, by bringing back the Unicorn as a wind body to do whatever with. Or you could just leave it there and have Birth and have those 2 extra forms of disruption. So yeah, Unicorn's definitely the best. But we're going to go ahead and normal summon Tetherwolf. Mandatory effect, summon out a token. It becomes a level 7 because it's gaining the levels of the token. It's level 3. 3 plus 4 is 7. Go into Dracosac. Dracosac effect, attach whatever to summon out 2 tokens. And then we're going to go ahead and, you know, I'm going to give my opponent this token here just to show that they have a monster. They don't need a monster, obviously. We just need a way to battle with an Xyz. So we're going to go into the battle phase, attack with our Dracosac. Dracosac says, while you control a token, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect. So whatever they have on their field, no matter the attack power it has, whatever, Dracosac's going to be able to pretty much get in untouched, which is great because we can attack, main phase 2, make a Zeus, link off 2 tokens into RBS, RBS effect, banish to 7. Probably going to be Wind Pegasus most of the time. Real the Yo-Yo and the Terror Top. Does not matter what we get here so long as we get to resolve Terror Top. Obviously, Yo-Yo is better because usually we can get an extra excavate off of it. but it's the same thing pretty much at the end of the day. We're going to use Rubber Band Shooter's effect to gain additional normal, and to that we will chain Zeus to wipe the board. Zeus resolves, then RBS resolves. We resolve our Terror Top, grabbing Tekatomborg effect to go ahead and tag out into two options here, right? Before we use the Tekatomborg, we could have used Birth to bring back the Unicorn and then tag into Piper to excavate 2 and then make a level 7 Synchro in the form of Fast Dragon or Clearwing, right? Or we could do what we're doing right now, which is bringing out Dendendiko Duke, getting that kind of brick out of the deck, setting our graveyard up with follow-up that Duke usually is, and then we bring back the Unicorn, and then Synchro 10 into Baron. We are locked into only summoning wind monsters right now, so we cannot make like an SP Little Knight, and yeah, could have gone for Piper to excavate 2 as well. No for a Car or another hand trap or something like that, as I already mentioned. So that is it for that combo. Next, we're going to take a look at, I believe, 4 pure Speedroid combos, and then one more kind of combo that's exclusive to Speedroid Kashtira, so let's hop into that one. So as I mentioned earlier in the sort of, I think the pure Speedroid deck profile segment, that Unicorn and Ultra Hound go really, really well together, and I kind of briefly rambled out the combo, but now we're going to kind of go ahead and take a look at it in depth, how just 2 cards can get you 4 forms of disruption, plus technically follow-up. The follow-up isn't guaranteed because Ultra Hound does need another card engraved to shuffle back to be able to summon out a Speedroid Synchro from the extra deck. But, you know, that will depend on what the other 3 cards in your hand are. So let's take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and start by special summoning the Unicorn. That's going to go ahead and grab a copy of Birth, and then normal summon the Ultra Hound. Ultra Hound effect to go ahead and send a Speedroid card. It's going to be Duplicate. Duplicate effect, targeting the Hound, make its level become 2, and then Synchro 3 into the High Speedroid Cork Shooter. Cork Shooter effect to go ahead and add another copy of Duplicate. Now, I guess technically one thing you could do here is if you really wanted to be really risky, you could add Wheel instead. Make Baron and then Wheel effect, hope you roll a 3 or higher and make Rubber Band Shooter after that and banish the 7 and go for Terror Top and Yo-Yo and try to combo from there. That would totally work, but you're definitely taking a big risk because if you roll a 2 or a 1, you're not doing anything else. You just wasted a Birth also. But it's food for thought, right? Maybe a play that comes up once every blue moon. But we're going to go ahead and Synchro 10 here, activate Birth, bring back the Unicorn, set the Duplicate, and that is the combo. So just 2 cards there giving us access to a Baron, a Unicorn, a Birth, and a Duplicate, which is, again, just basically a compulse. We can banish the Cork Shooter out of the grave to return a card our opponent controls to the hand. Not bad, right? For a deck with this power level, this nice 2 little card combo, you know, we're not playing the Cash Engine, which as you guys saw, a 2 card combo, the Cash Engine variant of the deck gets you a lot more. But for this variant, it's not so bad, considering that we're still getting 4 disrupts off of 2 cards, right? I think it's maybe 5 or more with the other variant. So again, and it's also a little bit cheaper to play this variant too. That's it for this combo. Very short, very simple. Let's take a look at the next one. Speaking of short and simple, that's exactly what this next combo is. It's just Terror Top. Now, just Terror Top could get you into a lot of things, but I think this is one of the most high value, most streamlined things that you could do with it that uses the least amount of extenders and sets you up with a lot. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and special summon the Terror Top. Terror Top effect, go ahead and search for a Speedroid monster. We're going to grab Tekatomborg. I'm just going to normal summon it here. Whatever else is in your hand will change whether you do that or not. If you have another Tekatomborg, I would advise normal summoning the first one so you could use the second one later. But we're going to bring out the Red Eye Die effect to make Terror Top a level 2, Synchro 3 into Cork Shooter. Use its second effect to go ahead and bring back its material since they're both Speedroids and they're both in the grave. And here we can proc the Red Eye Die effect again. And we're going to make Terror Top a level 6, and that's going to go for a level 7 Synchro in Wind Pegasus at Ignister. Now we can just quickly Synchro 10 for Baron, or we could go for Rubber Band Shooter by setting up the Wind Pegasus. But yeah, off of 1 card, you get the Wind Pegasus engraved plus Baron. You still have 4 cards in hand. And as I mentioned here, you could also make the Clearwing Synchro Dragon or Clearwing Fast Dragon and Synchro into Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, all off of just 1 card. But you don't get the added bonus of having Wind Pegasus engrave. And the thing is, too, if you use Baron's Interruption on the opponent's turn, you can just tag out into Terror Top and sort of restart your whole Speedroid engine again, which is really nice considering that you would have a tuner engrave. So Terror Top can get you like Duke, and then you could Synchro 6 and then have Duke to bring back the tuner, or you could grab Tekatomborg or whatever it may be, right? you have a lot kind of set up already engraved for you. Short, simple, to the point. Let's take a look at the next combo. So as much as I like the simplicity of the last combo, this combo is the complete opposite. This combo has so many different branching pathways and so many options you can take. It'll kind of make your head spin. I could almost make an entire video about this combo and all of its variations alone, but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. But this combo, I should also preface, does benefit from a few extra deck changes if you are playing the pure variant. Adding Raptite into the extra deck in place of Juju, I think, is a great idea, just because you'll find yourself getting in these situations where you'll have these small little synchro plays available to you turn one, and making Charge Warrior or Juju and just ending on those cards just feels so bad turn one, when at least we could just play something like Raptite, which in of its own is a decent interruption in this format, being a DD Crow on the opponent's turn. So it's just a very easy, accessible interruption we can get to, which will come up a lot in this variant, like level 6 synchro plays. And SP Little Knight is another card that I recommend playing too, because in combos like this, where we avoid the additional normal summon effect of Rubber Band Shooter, being able to link climb into SP Little Knight and have that as an option is really, really good. And I mean, I don't really need to say it, right? SP Little Knight is just a cracked card. We should be playing it and being able to make it whenever we can. That's something we just want in our wheelhouse of opportunities, right? I think that makes sense. But either way, this combo is going to start by normal summoning the Ultra Hound. This could be anything. This could be like Tether Wolf. It could be Marble Machine. Just a one card way to get into Rubber Band Shooter. I'm just opting to choose Hound because I think it's the best way to get into it, because we don't have to use Card Turbo or Tekaton Borg to get into our Rubber Band Shooter. It leaves us the most options in terms of available Speedroid extenders. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon it, activate effect to go ahead and send the duplicate. Duplicate effect will target the Hound, make it a level 2. Then we're going to link into our Band Shooter here. And we're going to banish a 7, and we're not going to reveal Piper, or Terratop and Yo-Yo rather. We're going to go ahead and reveal Piper and Duke. Now, this is a double foolish combo, I would call it, just because you can guarantee both Duke and Piper in the graveyard with the help of Wheel and get some extra bodies on top of it, ideally non-tuner bodies, to be able to resolve Piper's effect a lot better, activate more cards, and synchro climb. And you can also, again, avoid the additional normal summon effect of Rubber Band Shooter, which is ideally one of the best parts of this combo. But yeah, showing that you can do a lot with a little and how versatile it can be, just no matter what roles you get. Talking about the extra deck changes there. So we're going to go ahead and activate the Wheel. 1 is obviously the worst outcome. If you get a 1, you're going to summon out your Red Eye Die, bring out the Piper with a Duke, excavate 2. We're going to say it's a piece of non-engine. And then we're going to go ahead and link into the SP Little Knight. You could also summon IP Masquerena, so you have the IP and the SP play on the opponent's turn, and then the SP banish on top of that, right? But that requires more extra deck space, which is kind of hard in the pure variant because you don't have a lot of space. So it's probably just going to be SP Little Knight. But we're going to rewind here and change the outcome, right? Let's say we get a 2, right? We get access to a non-tuner now. So what we can do is go ahead and use Duke, bring out the Piper all the same. Excavate 2, get a piece of non-engine ideally, which is, it's always just going to be a hand trap in this case. And then Synchro 6 into Raptite, right? See, very just kind of low-hanging fruit synchro play to be able to make. That's an interruption, plus we ideally get a hand trap. Now, if you have non-tuner bodies on field before resolving the Wheel, the less the result will matter, and you guys will see how that kind of plays out towards the end. Now we're going to go ahead and resolve a 3. Obviously, going to be a bit better of an outcome. And then we're going to go ahead and use the Duke, bring out the Piper. Piper excavates for 3 this time. Get a piece of non-engine. Synchro 6 for Raptite. Low-hanging fruit. Easy interruption to make. Plus a SP Little Knight. Which, I mean, having these 2 types of interruptions against some decks is going to be very easy. Yes, we have our standard, you know, Baron and level 7 synchro plays. But when things don't pan out, when we're working with small little pieces, we want to be able to have, again, these easy, accessible cards to go into, like Raptite, like SP Little Knight, to kind of make up for when we don't have our bread and butter combos, right? We're just kind of comboing with whatever we have right now. So that's why I wanted to show this off. That's why I like this combo a lot. And this, not really a combo, but more so of a concept. And one of the things that's really cool about Speedroid Wheel. So yeah, just kind of showing you here. Now let's say we had a unicorn on field. It could also be Terratop as well. Anything that you would have done before you normal summoned your Hound. And we got a 5 here, which is really good. but a 3 or higher would have also been just fine as well. Even a 1, because you could synchro into like Kite Drake and have that on field in case it gets cleared. But rolling a 5 here is really good because it's going to allow us to get into Baron. And then we can Duke for the Piper and go ahead and Excavate for 3, get a piece of non-engine, and make either SP Little Knight, or we can go ahead and make a copy of Raptite, or you can make Charge Warrior to draw an additional card if you had another extender in hand. Like if you had Card Turbo, you can make Charge Warrior, and then summon the Card Turbo and make the Shen, right? You can play Shen over something like one of the second level 7 synchros if you wanted to, but it's kind of cutting it close. But I think cutting down to 1 level 7 synchro makes more sense in the pure variant than it does in the speed cash variant. So that's this combo there, and a lot of its branching pathways. Let's take a look at a little bit more simple combo. So this next combo here is a bread and butter Speedroid combo for a long time now. Double Crystal Wing and the variations that it has. That's why we play 2 Crystal Wing in the extra deck, just because again it's so easy to make 2 Crystal Wings, because this deck is just really good at level 8 synchros, right? So we're gonna go ahead and special summon Terror Top. You're ideally going to want to start with Marble and Terror Top. I think that's like the best 2-card way to get into it. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and special Terror Top, grab Tekatomborg, and then Marble Machine's going to get normal to grab Card Turbo, right? One of these cards is going to grab one of these cards. Whatever order you grab them in doesn't matter. We're going to special summon Tekatomborg. Tekatomborg is going to tag out in a Duke. I'd recommend it doing this way first, just because you get Duke Engrave early. We're going to Synchro 5 into Hagoita. Now, this is our 5th summon, right? So if they nib here, we can still make a Crystal Wing, because these would go to the graveyard. We would go ahead and Duke for the Card Turbo, Hagoita graveyard effect, since we control a Speedroid tuner. We can summon it back, make a Crystal Wing, all right? So that's one thing we could do. Or if they don't have nib, we can make a second Crystal Wing, or we can make a RBS with it protected by the first Crystal Wing, right? But that play feels kind of bad because if they have an Imperm, that sucks. It feels real bad. You got to kind of bank on them having an Ash or a Veiler or something else, right? So we make the first Crystal Wing, and then we're going to go ahead and use Duke to go ahead and bring out Card Turbo, and then Hagoita effect to summon itself to the field, right? And we can make that first Crystal Wing and just kind of end our turn here, or we could take it a step further and try to establish a bit more follow-up, and you know, still establish the same interruptions, but kind of get a little bit more follow-up on top of it, right? So this is where we can take it. We can go ahead and Synchro 7 into the, Synchro 7. Link 2 into our Brand Shooter, activate effect, banish the 6 to go ahead and reveal Duke and Hound. And then whichever you get here will change the outcomes slightly. If we get the Duke, we can just normal summon it and make a Crystal Wing, right? Same thing, we get the extra follow-up by having Duke and Hound engrave. Or if we get the Hound, we can additional normal the Hound, activate its effect, send duplicate effect, target the Hound, make it level 2, Synchro 3 into Cork Shooter effect, grab duplicate, or you can grab a wheel if you already got the other duplicate, and then Synchro 8 into the second Crystal Wing, just like that. So you have double Crystal Wing, you have the duplicate, you have the Denden Daiko Duke engrave as follow-up, you have the Hound engrave as follow-up, and you have the Hagoita engrave. So next turn, you can establish a Kite Drake by going Hound, return Terror Top, then summon out Cork Shooter, and then Hagoita effect, special summon itself to the field, and then Synchro 8 for a board wipe or a mass negate that does not target. So a lot of options there on the table through those 3 interruptions that you establish off of just, what, 2 cards, right? And yeah, not a bad combo. One of Speedroid's best combos for a long time now. Let's go ahead and take a look at another one. So for the last of the combos I have to show for you guys in this guide video, we're going to take a look at one more Speedroid Kashtira variant combo. And this one is kind of like swappable with the Zeus combo, because I think if you're going to play Omega in your extra deck, I think you could cut Zeus. It's really format dependent, because it's a little bit of a greedy combo. If hand traps are less prominent, people are more on board breakers, I think maybe doing this line makes a bit more sense, because you could see how this combo could lose out very, very easily to like any hand trap, right? But it's still a really cool line, right? And I like it quite a bit, just because Omega is such an incredible card with the Kashtira stuff nonetheless. So special summon Fenrir, grab Unicorn, normal summon a effect Veiler, right? Level 1 tuner. Go into Omega, activate Omega effect, and special summon out the Unicorn, activate Unicorn effect, go ahead and grab Birth, activate the Birth, And we're going to go ahead and bring back the Fenrir. And this is just, again, standard Speedroid combo like you guys have seen at the beginning of the video, right? What we get off this doesn't matter so long as we can resolve Terror Top. The level 3 token being left over pairs perfectly well with what we're trying to do. Bring out Piper, Excavate 3, grab a Hand Trap, Synchro 10 for Baron with the remaining cards, and boom, there you go. The opponent is down a card, and you have a Baron plus ideally a non-engine piece in hand, and you would also have 3 other cards in hand too. Very, very cool line. I like it. It's high risk, high reward, but it is something that you technically can do in this deck, and this may be a format dependent thing as well. So that is it for this combo section. As I mentioned, I would recommend checking out the dedicated Speedroid cash combo video I made a couple months ago, and alongside the other videos I'm going to be recommending in the outro section, which is what we're going to be moving to next. And here we are in the conclusion / closing thoughts segment of this Speedroid guide video here in 2024. If you guys made it all the way through this video, I really appreciate it. Please drop a like and subscribe if you have not done so already for more guide videos to come on a lot of the decks that I've covered on this channel in the past. Some guides for decks I've never made guides before are coming, and some sort of re-updated guides much like this one. But yeah, I got a few talking points here, not too many things. The first being the cost of the deck. The pure Speedroid deck is surprisingly pretty cheap. A lot of the cards got reprinted when that Duelist set came out. That was kind of wind themed. I forget the name of the set, but a lot of the engine cards got reprinted, right? So it's pretty cheap. A lot of the Speedroid core is pretty cheap, especially in low rarity. You're not playing the cash cards in that variant outside of just Unicorn and Birth, which those cards in their own right are definitely a lot cheaper compared to their counterparts like Fenrir and Raidsoth. So you can save a lot of money by playing this particular variant. Now, especially now that Baron has been reprinted to death, you can easily pick up a Baron or two for this deck. The only thing that's obviously going to be expensive are non-engine staples like Hand Traps and things like SP Little Knight, which, as I already mentioned, I think before, you don't have to play SP Little Knight in the deck. You could play the old classic IP into Unicorn if you want to as well, but that comes at the cost of, you know, cramming more cards that don't come up as often in the extra deck. So again, keep that in mind. And obviously, the Speedroid Kashtira variant is a lot more expensive. You need Raidsoth, you need Fenrir's, you need SP Little Knight, you need those cards in the deck. So of course it is going to be a little bit more expensive. You got to play Pot of Prosperity as well, which I think has had some reprints, but it's probably still a pretty pricey card as I'm recording this, so keep that in mind. Some good budget replacements for things like Fenrir, again, are just things like Ascendant of Thunder, playing Terraforming if you have Raidsoth at all, or playing Wandering Griffin Rider, or the Harpy's Pet Phantasmal Dragon. Just level 7 bodies you can get on the field to be able to help establish Draco Sack, or playing things like Small World that help you turbo into cards like Unicorn, because that is really the heart and soul of a lot of these combos, or they just make certain combos better in of its own, right? That's how good Unicorn is for this deck. So if you got a tight budget, I'd recommend Pure. If you got some cash to throw around on a fun, relatively competitive deck, so long as you learn the ins and outs, I would definitely recommend going for this Speedroid Kashtira variant. So keep that in mind. Next, I'd like to mention a set of videos that I can recommend you guys watch to get a better idea of how to learn and play the deck. I've played this deck a lot extensively in my Saturday Night Locals series, where I strap a camera to my head and play at locals, so you get a first-person view of how I'm playing the deck and how I'm making plays in real time. Some do not have commentary, so it's just the raw audio of locals, and some I did provide post commentary just to kind of give you guys a better idea of what was going on in my head when I made the plays and kind of critiquing my plays as I go along. So that's a great way to learn the deck right up front. I've uploaded feature matches with the deck, both Speed Cash and Pure. Granted, the Pure content I have made with this deck was back when Auroradon was legal, so the combos are a little bit different, but not every combo goes into Auroradon, and the combos that don't go into Auroradon look very similar to some of the combos that you guys saw in this video. So I'd recommend checking out those feature matches. I'd recommend checking out Saturday Night Locals to see how the decks are played. Of course, I do have dedicated combo videos like the one I talked about earlier, the dedicated 6, I think, crucial Speed Cash combos to know. I'd recommend that video alongside some other test hand videos I've made in the past as well. Those are some great resources for you guys to also look into. And last but not least, one of the most important things I wanted to talk about in regards to this deck in general is just to manage your expectations, right? The deck can be pretty competitive, but it still is a rogue deck at heart, so winning meta matchups is mostly going to be an uphill battle, and if you want to excel with this deck, it is going to require lots of time and effort into learning how to beat those particular matchups with this deck, learning combo lines, learning tech cards in the extra deck that fit better in certain, against certain decks like Fire King or Labyrinth, whatever it may be, right? It can win, it can compete, it's just going to be difficult, right? That's one thing that is very important to remember, not only for this deck, but all rogue decks in general. If you really value winning at the core of your Yu-Gi-Oh experience, then I would recommend, again, the Speedroid Kashtira variant, because I think that is far more competitive than the pure Speedroid version. If you're looking to play a little bit more sauce, and have a little bit more fun playing the deck, pure Speed is definitely more so that style, but I like both decks. I played both decks. I really enjoy both. If Auroradon was legal, I'd probably be playing pure Speedroid, but the thing is, you have to remember, if you're playing pure Speedroid, you're still playing Unicorn. It's just how big is this Kashtira engine going to be, right? And I think it goes without saying, winning with a deck and playing it properly and comboing correctly is extremely satisfying. It is every single time. It doesn't get old. That's why I keep coming back to the deck. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got here in my little script for this guide video. I hope you guys learned something. And again, much like all my guide videos, I encourage you guys to drop important pieces of information down in the comment section for things that I may have missed or gotten wrong in this video, as that is definitely a likely thing to happen. So feel free to add a little community group discussion down in the comments for other people to get value out of that they may not have gotten in this particular video. But if you, again, watch the whole video all the way through, I cannot thank you guys enough. It means a lot. And again, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the other ways you can support the channel in the description. And last but not least, Winter Kills signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And like always, I'd like to extend a big thank you to our current Divine level channel members, who are Pony Stark, Green, Misfit, H8 Cyber, Robin's Assistant, and Muffin King 313. Thank you guys so much as always for showing me kind and very generous support of this channel.